Atop a towering peak beneath the silent night sky, two figures stood facing each other in tense confrontation. Jin So-eun, captain of the Sejong squad. Your memory is truly extraordinary. Thanks to you. A tall silhouette loomed like a mountain, gazing down at the defeated man drawing his last gasps at his feet. Every last record of the Murim alliance has been restored. I am truly deeply grateful. Yeong So-eun, alliance leader of the Murim alliance, the divine sword of great purity. The young man knelt collapsed upon the earth, fresh blood pooling from his mortal wounds. You told me to commit them to memory, and I did. You told me to reconstruct them, and I obeyed. Yet, is this how you repay me? With a death as meaningless as this? Asked Jin So-eun, captain of the Sejong squad. A cold, metallic rasp echoed as a hand slowly drew a razor-sharp blade from its sheath. I have heard that you even memorized the archives of the Pavilion of Deep Mysteries, the most classified repository of the Murim alliance. If someone like you were to collude with the demonic cult, our alliance could fall into unimaginable peril. The gleaming tip of the sword pointed directly at the dying man's chest, devoid of mercy. For the justice of the GMQ, for the greater good, and for the safety of the Murim alliance. You and your memories must be utterly erased from this world. Jin So-eun hung his head, letting out a bitter, mocking scoff at the hypocritical words. For the greater good, he say. The cold-hearted alliance leader leveled his sword, while his opponent, though completely exhausted of strength, showed not a shred of fear. The Murim alliance. Danger. The Murim alliance was already rooted by the demonic cult, and forced to flee, desperately clinging to its last dying breaths. I am utterly amazed that you still think there is any greater peril left to fall into. The Murim alliance will defeat the demonic cult and once more rebuild the power of the Murim. The very Murim alliance that fled to the North Sea, sacrificing countless souls as human shields. Fine, then I shall wait, and see. Let us see how you will build that so-called greater good of yours. But you know, seeing you value your precious greater good over human lives makes me wonder. In the end, who is the true disciple of the demonic cult, and who is the righteous member of the Murim alliance? The alliance leader's bloodshot eyes flared with raw fury as the truth struck a nerve. You have been corrupted by the demonics. Refusing to argue any further, his heel reached the very edge of the bottomless abyss. To think that I once entrusted my life and the destiny of the Tae sect into the filthy hands of the Murim alliance. How utterly tragic. His blood-stained hand twitched slightly, preparing for one final, resolute choice. But at least, my death will be of my own choosing. His slender figure fell freely down the sheer cliffside, leaving all the grievances of the Jianhu behind. Precisely because I remembered everything, my life was always a living hell. Tattered sect banners fluttered violently in the wind, evoking memories of a devastating war. When the Great War between the Murim alliance and the demonic cult erupted, my junior disciples and I were dragged into the conflict as mere martial artists of a small, weak sect. Yet, the demonic cult was far too powerful, and the Murim alliance was far too weak. Ultimately, the Murim alliance chose to flee to the North Sea, leaving us behind as human shields to buy time for their high-ranking officials to escape. It was then that the Murim alliance approached me with an offer. Memorize every historical record of the Murim alliance. If you commit them to memory and reconstruct them at our North Sea base, we will withdraw your Tae sect juniors from the battlefield. You wouldn't want to see them perish as human shields, would you? And so, I risked my life to memorize it all. And yet, Jin So-eun lay motionless in a pool of crimson blood beneath the dark canopy, his breath growing fainter as death closed in. Damn it. Should I have gone to the battlefield instead of rotting in some dusty corner of the archives, memorizing books? If I had, I could have sacrificed myself to help at least one more person escape. No, I should have trained much harder, long before all this. His face was smeared with blood, his glazed eyes staring helplessly into the empty void above. Damn it, why did the heavens grant me such a useless ability? If they were going to give me something, why couldn't it be something truly useful? Like internal eye, for instance. His blood-soaked hand trembled slightly as the jade bracelet on his wrist suddenly emitted an eerie emerald glow. With death staring me in the face, nothing remained in my heart but boundless, bitter regret. The light from the bracelet flared intensely, enveloping his surroundings in a mystical radiance. If only I were stronger. Strong enough to save my juniors. Instead of begging others to protect us, I should have attained the power, should protect my own self. The surrounding space abruptly shifted. Jin So-eun, is this all the capability you possess? Why don't you get up right away? What did this bastard? Has he actually lost consciousness? What an absolute fool. Your juniors held out far longer than this. Jin Soon's collapsed hand gripped the hilt of his wooden sword. Damn it. This cursed memory. He hung his head, blood trickling from his forehead down his cheek, gritting his teeth against a pounding headache. Even now. Jin Soon bolted upright, his mouth agape as he screamed in agony. Recalling the pain too. It's driving me mad. He looked around in a daze. Before him stood an insolent-looking bastard holding a wooden sword, alongside a long line of fellow disciples currently in training. Oh. Jin Soon's eyes widened to their limits, his pupils shrinking in sheer disbelief at this impossible sight. This place is. Is this the training ground of the Teal sect? Two junior disciples standing nearby stared with wide-eyed bewilderment, unable to comprehend what was happening to their senior brother. And Jin Soon's face flushed with overwhelming emotion, tears welling in his eyes as this crazy reality set in. His steps hurried as he lunged forward. Out of nowhere, Jin Soon lunged forward and pulled the two younger disciples into a tight embrace. Both of them stood frozen, utterly clueless as to what was happening. Choking back tears, he cried out junior sister Hum's name. Flushing red, she tried to push him away, exclaiming, "How gross. What on earth are you doing, senior brother Jin?" Young Gimpio scratched his head in bewilderment upon hearing his senior brother call him a fool. Worried, he asked what was wrong with senior brother Jin. The young disciples nearby began to whisper among themselves. Some muttered, "Weren't we just fine? Did senior brother Jin eat something strange?" The children clamored, asking one another what was wrong with him, what was happening, or if this was just another of his pranks. One child even ran over to tell their senior sister that senior brother Jin was acting weird again. Watching this lively scene, Jin Soon was deeply moved, realizing that his junior brothers and sisters of the Taeil sect were indeed still alive. Junior sister Hong stared in confusion at the tears rolling down his cheeks, asking if he was crying, while Gyo softly called out to him. Meanwhile, Jin Soon remained in a state of shock, his thoughts still hazy and disjointed. Beholding these familiar, flesh and blood faces before him, Jin Soon let out a bright smile, thinking to himself that this was not bad at all. The two children exchanged bewildered glances at their senior brother's bizarre behavior. Junior sister Han crossed her arms and grumbled about what was going on, while Gimpio scratched his head, asking what she meant. Jin Soon reached out to gently poke her cheek, chuckling, "You know, junior sister Han, you were truly adorable as a child. I never realized it back then, because you nagged so much." He then softly added that he had even missed her nagging. Turning to pinch Gimpio's cheek, he teased, "I used to find you so annoying for wetting the bed back then. But if I could turn back time, I'd gladly wash those blankets with you 100, even 1,000 times." The boy's face flushed with embarrassment, as he cried out, "Why on earth are you bringing that up now, brother?" Just as Jin Soon was rejoicing, thinking how wonderful it was to see these faces before he died, a cold voice cut through the air, calling his name. A youth wielding a wooden sword stepped forward, asking with utter disdain if he was playing mad out of fear of their duel. Chil Young pointed his wooden sword forward, a provocative smirk on his lips. He threatened that if Jin Soon didn't pick up his sword right away, his precious little juniors would have to face him instead. Jin Soon let out a wary sigh, thinking how cruel it was that his hazy memories couldn't conjure up anything better. Glancing at the insufferable pest before him, he wondered why it had to be this guy of all people. Chil Yan was the pampered young master of the Ryong merchant group, who had used his family's wealth to buy his way into the Teal sect. He bellowed, ordering Jin Soon to pick up his sword. Jin Soon knew all too well that this bastard used the pretext of sparring to beat other disciples within an inch of their lives, only to hide behind his father's wealth and influence afterward. Recalling how he had once endured it all for fear of losing their financial backing, Jin Soon slowly bent down and picked up the wooden sword. "Fine," he replied coldly, "if you want it that badly." Jin Soon fell into a confident stance, a razor-sharp smile cutting across his face. He thought that if heaven willed him to beat this bastard to a pulp even within a hazy memory, who was he to refuse? Might as well settle some old scores while he was at it. Chil Young gritted his teeth in fury at his opponent's utter lack of fear. Lunging forward in a frenzy, he unleashed a barrage of wild slashes, roaring, "You arrogant bastard!" In stark contrast to his opponent's rage, Jin Soon's gaze remained incredibly calm and sharp, tracking every single movement. Observing his opponent's footwork, Jin Soon immediately recognized the familiar technique. The boy was deploying the very sword art that had caused him endless suffering in his past life, the Three Lights sword. This technique had been passed down by Hyun Won-soo, a renowned rogue swordsman hired by the realm merchant group. Though the strikes of the Three Lights sword were crude and lacked refinement, they were incredibly brutal and powerful, carrying the distinct, savage style of a vagabond warrior. Furthermore, as it deliberately targeted the eyes, the young disciples of the Tay sect were utterly helpless against it. Even in my past life, I had memorized those moves and techniques the very instant I laid eyes on them. Yet back then, I lacked the strength to evade and strike back. However, closing his eyes slightly, he effortlessly evaded the treacherous sword strike hurtling toward him. Compared to the frenzied zealots of the demonic cult I had fought since then, this technique was child's play. His opponent's eyes widened in sheer disbelief as his pride and joy attack was so easily neutralized. He could not believe the sight unfolding before his very eyes. Memories surged back into his mind, depicting himself frantically flipping through the pages of martial arts manuals. And those techniques. In the dark of the night, his bloodshot eyes burned with unwavering resolve and resentment. I had desperately committed every single one of them to memory. Within that archive, amidst the vast expanse of the Grand Library, where thousands of books drifted through the air, his opponent lunged forward with a powerful yet clumsy overhead strike. His pupils contracted sharply, focusing with absolute precision on his foe's trajectory to spot the fatal opening. He slipped past the blade by a hair's breadth, whipping up a sharp gust of wind that swept decisively across the ground. Unleashing a strike of flawless precision and power with his wooden sword, he executed the first basic form of the Lesser Heavenly Sword Art. The Lesser Heavenly Sword Art. This is absurd. How could someone like you possibly know this technique? A smug, exhilarated smile spread across his face as he watched his opponent fall entirely onto the defensive. The sensation of executing this technique with his own hands was truly magnificent. To thrash this bastard using our very own Lesser Heavenly Sword Art. With a powerful swing, he brought the wooden sword crashing down upon the man's head in a thunderous blow. What pure, unadulterated bliss. As the two figures flashed past each other on the training grounds, the surrounding disciples stood in stunned silence, captivated by the dramatic duel. The eldest son staggered, clutching his head in agony as fresh blood began to seep from his forehead, while Jin So-eun merely stood by, watching with utter nonchalance. Jin So-eun. Blood. You dared use that rubbish Lesser Heavenly Sword Art to strike the head of the eldest son of the Realm Merchant Guild. Driven mad with rage, his face contorted in a mask of murderous intent and hatred as he shrieked in absolute fury. Are you prepared to face the consequences of your reckless arrogance? Shil Yeon collapsed to the ground, completely unconscious. Jin So-eun stood there dazed, gripping his wooden sword, a metaphorical question mark of sheer bewilderment hovering over his head at such an effortless victory. A young disciple stood frozen in disbelief, his mouth hanging open as he stammered soundlessly, utterly dumbfounded by the sight. Senior brother Jin So-eun, you are incredible. I had no idea you were this powerful. Even if you steal my candy now, I won't even cry. Senior brother, I am so sorry for secretly thinking you were pathetic all this time. Jin So-eun's face twitched slightly as he desperately tried to suppress a smug grin amidst the sudden onslaught of praise from his younger martial siblings. Looking up at the sky, Jin So-eun let out a deeply satisfied laugh, telling himself that since he had managed to beat Chil Hyung to a pulp before crossing the Yellow Springs, he had no lingering regrets left in this mortal realm. Closing his eyes, Jin So-eun basked in the sweet taste of victory, wishing he would never have to wake from this dreamlike memory. Suddenly, a devastating punch caught him squarely in the face from the side, drawing a sharp cry of agony from his lips. Fuming with rage, junior sister Hong clenched her fists and screamed at the top of her lungs, asking Jin So-eun if he had completely lost his mind, leaving him to utter a bewildered, in absolute shock. Scolding him through her anxiety, junior sister Hong demanded to know what they would do if the Realm Merchant Guild cut off their financial support, curiously asking if he thought the others let themselves be beaten out of sheer stupidity. Meanwhile, clutching his throbbing, swollen cheek, Jin So-eun winced as the stinging pain registered, wondering how on earth he was able to feel pain like this. Jin So-eun's eyes widened in shock as junior sister Hong ranted about how their martial siblings had struggled just to secure 2 meals a day, and what they would do now that they were reduced to only one. Nursing his itching face, a sudden realization began to dawn on him: something was terribly wrong. Junior sister Hong continued to shout, demanding how he intended to take responsibility. Amidst the chaotic training yard, Jin So-eun stood frozen in place, suddenly realizing that this was absolutely not some fleeting dream before death. What utter nonsense. Flying into a towering rage, junior sister Hong unleashed a devastating uppercut straight into Jin So-eun's face, screaming to ask what kind of rubbish he was spouting. Blown away by the sheer force of the blow, Jin So-eun was sent flying into the air, crashing heavily onto the ground as if his soul had been ripped from his body. His junior disciples panicked, weeping as they begged their senior brother to wake up and accusing junior sister Han of murder. Yet, in that moment of facing death once again, he was struck by the shocking realization that he had indeed returned to the past. Jin So-eun lay motionless on the infirmary bed, a large bandage plastered over his cheek and an herbal medicine tube stuffed in his mouth, his vacant eyes staring at the ceiling in utter resignation. Lying lazily in the medical room with his hands cradled behind his head, Jin So-eun chewed on his medicine while trying to piece together the events that had unfolded since his junior sister knocked him unconscious. First, it all began with the resurrection of the demonic cult. The Murim Alliance, which stood against them, was utterly annihilated in defeat. And our Teal sect, as a member of the alliance, stood on the precipice of total destruction. Meanwhile, because I possessed a memory that was unnecessarily exceptional, I was tasked with memorizing and restoring every single ancient text owned by the Murim Alliance. As memories of his past life flooded back, Jin So-eun, despite his mouth being filled with blood, resolutely told himself that he could commit even more to memory. He would engrave every single book and document of the Murim Alliance into his mind, without omitting a single character. Kneeling at the feet of Yong So, he was willing to trade everything if only it meant safety for his fellow disciples. Please, let my junior brothers and sisters remain far away from these battles. However, because those very memories could become an obstacle to the future of the Murim Alliance. After that, I thought I had died. Yet, when I'd opened my eyes once more, had I actually returned to the past. And, carrying the vast knowledge of martial arts manuals still engraved in my mind back with me, because of that, I was able to defeat Chil Hyun, someone I could never have beaten before. What on earth is happening? He lay there, scratching his head in sheer bewilderment. What had truly transpired? Come to think of it, though my body and clothes have returned to this era, this jade dragon bracelet somehow journeyed back to the past with me. He intently observed the glowing jade bracelet on his wrist. This is the bracelet of a guardian Tarmat, king of the demonic cult, claimed in one of our rare victories amidst countless battles. I recall this bracelet suddenly glowing with blinding brilliance at the very moment I drew my last breath in my past life. Why did that happen? Could this bracelet be connected to his regression? While lost in thought, a piercing screech echoed from outside, demanding that the bastard Jin So-eun be dragged out immediately. Jin So-eun bolted upright, his eyes turning toward the door with an expression of deep suspicion. Outside, a portly man was pointing his finger and bellowing, demanding the culprit who had beaten his son. The sect leader could only apologize for his lack of discipline and pleaded with the man to speak with him instead of So-eun. Yet, the arrogant man threatened to cut off all financial aid to the Teal sect this very month for daring to lay a hand on the hair of the Ryan Merchant Guild. Standing submissively behind the door, the sect leader of the Teal sect explained that he was deeply grateful to the Ryan Merchant Guild, but seeing as So-eun had also collapsed, it seemed the two had simply fought. Even so, he had to humble himself, promising to severely punish So-eun to beg for forgiveness. Jin So-eun recognized the man as Yeon Seo, the master of the Ryan Merchant Guild and the father of the boy he had just defeated. The old man continued to spit insults, calling him a lowly rustic and mocking the fallen state of the Teal sect. The elder loudly scolded that if the sect leader had raised his disciple properly, this would never have happened, leaving the sect leader with no choice but to bow his head in apology. Watching from behind, Jin So-eun witnessed the entire scene with a cold, piercing gaze. He began to recall his brothers in arms who had perished in his past life. The image of junior sister hung drowning in a sea of corpses, and Gianpio stabbed and collapsed on the ground. Finally, the scene of his own death flashed before his eyes. He bit fiercely into a dry ration, his face twisted in anger. He began to stretch his shoulders, regaining his composure. Very well. A confident smile graced his lips, his gaze sharp and cold as he prepared for a grand scheme. It was time to stir up a magnificent storm. Outside, the pink-haired elder of the Teal sect bowed deeply, seeing the guest off with polite deference. Thank you for your generosity in overlooking this matter. The obese merchant merely let out a disdainful snort and turned away. Yeon Seo, leader of the Gyereon Merchant Guild and father of Chil Yeon, made no effort to hide his irritation. A shawl let it slide, but only this once. From atop the high roof, a leisurely voice drifted down, halting them in their tracks. I heard you have been searching for me quite desperately. Jin So-eun cupped his hands in a polite greeting, though his face wore a deeply mocking smirk. Greetings. I am that humble rustic, Jin So-eun. Startled, both of them snapped their heads up toward the roof. Yan Sidok stammered. Jin So-woon. The obese merchant instantly flew into a rage, pointing an accusatory finger, and roaring at the boy's appearance. Jin So-woon. Ah, so you are the wretched brat who dared injure my Chil Yeom. Letting out a wary sigh at the man's overbearing arrogance, Jin So-woon replied, who are you calling a brat? It's not as though there is a vast gulf between our ages, is there? The two froze in place, staring at each other in utter bewilderment as a myriad of question marks practically materialized above their heads. Jin So-woon suddenly recalled that he had regressed, meaning his current age was far from what he remembered. He hastily covered his blunder with a sarcastic drawl. Ah, right. I did regress, didn't I? Well, anyway. Making such a fuss over a mere tap on the head during a friendly spar. Tell me, when senior brother enters the Manhwa Academy, do you intend to tag along and throw a tantrum there as well? What? Did you not use underhanded tricks under the guise of a spar to strike Chil Yeom's head? Furthermore, Wei Chil Yeom is not some common child who needs to train in a wretched place like your Taeil Sak. You wretched fools only exist to serve him with absolute devotion until he enters the Manhwa Academy. That is your sole purpose. Resting his chin on his palm with an air of profound boredom, Jin So-woon leisurely dismantled the merchant's words. But what of the dozen junior brothers who could not leave their beds for days after being thrashed by senior brother? And while we are on the subject of spars, if I may be so bold as to say. His gaze suddenly turned razor sharp, piercing straight into the merchant and sending a shiver down the man's spine. To expect him to enter the Manhwa Academy with martial arts so pitiful they were utterly crushed by a humble rustic from a third-rate sect. You truly are a master of delusion. You insolent brat. How dare you? My lord, please, calm your anger. Yeon Seok lunged forward and seized Jin So-woon by the collar, roaring with venomous threat, while the youth merely maintained his placid smile. Do you dare behave with such arrogance because you believe you can bear the consequences when my guild cuts off all funding to the Taeil sect? Responsibility, you say. Though the Taeil sect is counted among the 108 peaks, is it not virtually indistinguishable from a third-rate clan on the brink of ruin? If I so desire, I can easily strike a deal with any other sect. Is that what you want? But should that come to pass, will your precious Taeil sect not find itself begging for its next meal? The 108 Peaks was a title designating the foremost sects of the Manhwa Alliance, and the Taeil sect was indeed one of them. However, they had dwindled into a third-rate clan that had long lost its former glory, retaining the title in name only. Yet, there remained one extraordinary privilege bestowed by the Manhwa Alliance upon the members of the 108 Peaks. The majestic gate of the Manhwa Academy loomed. For the Academy's entrance examinations, each sect of the Peaks held the right to recommend a single disciple for special admission, bypassing the grueling selection trials entirely. A portrait of a smug Chil Yeom came to mind. In truth, as the rightful heir to the Gyeryong Merchant Guild, he had no inherent connection to the 108 Peaks. Yet, to secure entry into the Manhwa Academy via special admission, his family had poured a colossal fortune in sponsorship into our mediocre Taeil sect, enrolling him under the title of a lay disciple. Jin So-woon stood face to face with the corpulent merchant guild leader. Go ahead, the youth said nonchalantly. The man blinked in confusion. What? Leaning in close, Jin So-woon's smile turned enigmatic. I shall take responsibility. Do as you please. But first, there is something I am genuinely curious about. Jin So-woon's hand, adorned with a jade bracelet, clamped down like a vice around the merchant leader's wrist. There is less than a year remaining until the special admission evaluations. Jin So-woon's expression suddenly shifted into something deeply unsettling, a challenging grin stretching across his face. Why would a prominent guild leader like you bypass so many noble clans among the 108 Peaks, only to send your precious son to a dilapidated place like this? Do not tell me. You were rejected by every single one of them. The merchant leader's eyes bulged, beads of cold sweat rolling down his face from sheer fury. He gritted his teeth, hissing, You miserable brat. In my past life, we had to cater to the Gyeryong Merchant Guild's every whim and demand. The guild leader struggled to wrench his hand free, yet he was utterly powerless against Jin So-woon's iron grip. You arrogant, well, how dare you? He roared. How dare you? Do you have any idea of who I am to treat me with such insolence? We even recommended Chil Yeom for special admission, and secured his entry into the Manhwa Academy. The merchant guild leader waved his arms, roaring in fury, Wake up. Do you not realize that the Manhwa Alliance no longer cares about a measly sect like the Tae? Remember this while the Keelung Merchant Guild is the only power capable of saving you wretched fools. Jin So-woon lowered his head slightly, his cold gaze hidden behind his hair. Even after all that had transpired, once he had entered the Murim Academy. Leaning close to the merchant leader's ear, Jin Soon whispered razor-sharp words. He had best remember this well too. The Tai sect is the only sect that can save the Kulon Merchant Guild. The Kulon Merchant Guild had finally cut off their funding. The merchant leader's pupils contracted in sheer terror at Jin Soon's chilling threat. Jin Soon turned and walked away with absolute resolve, leaving the merchant leader standing frozen. Begging others for protection was utterly futile. The merchant leader trembled with humiliation and rage. One must possess the strength to protect oneself. The merchant leader lunged forward, intending to attack from behind. He shrieked, "You insolent brat!" But Jin Soon remained perfectly calm. That was the lesson I learned after dying once. But how am I going to resolve this? I still haven't thought of a way. A blood-red sunset descended upon the treacherous ravine, heralding a perilous journey ahead. The dark, cold entrance of the cavern was tangled with giant spider webs that emitted a faint, deadly glow. Standing before the web-choked cavern, Soon told himself, right now, my single greatest mission is to become stronger. But if I rely solely on our useless, inefficient Tai cultivation method and the lesser heaven sword art, gaining strength will be nigh impossible. Thus, only one path remains. To acquire overwhelmingly profound internal energy through miraculous elixirs, specifically that legendary 10,000-year fire ginseng radiating its brilliant glow ahead. One of the Murim Alliance's classified records, the Chronicle of Jianfu Elixirs, detailed everything from the discovery sites and appearance times to the transit routes of every elixir in the martial world. And my mind remembers every single word of that information, with absolute perfection. And so, I have decided to act immediately. I plan to recall the records, and then find and consume each elixir one by one. But the obstacle lies in that gatekeeper, the human-faced spider, which looks far more repulsive than the book described. Very well. Seizing the 10,000-year fire ginseng is the first step to altering my destiny. With our Tai sect's lesser heaven sword art, I shall subdue it in a single strike. But there was no such thing as an easy victory. Both my internal cultivation and my swordsmanship are pathetic. Is there any point in putting up such a futile effort? Winning by mere book learning is only enough to handle someone of Chil Yeong's caliber. He sheathed his sword, bent down to retrieve a dry branch, and lit it, creating a blazing torch. After committing hundreds of thousands of books to memory, I realized a highly practical truth. Sublime swordsmanship is not everything. The martial path or supreme sword arts I no longer care about such tedious trivialities. The human-faced spider widened its hideous eyes in sheer panic as the violent flames swept toward it. To me, victory is all that matters. The flames erupted violently, incinerating the beast as it shrieked in agony. He clenched his fist tightly, offering a silent, profound word of thanks. Letting out a hearty laugh, he shouted, "I must thank you bastards of the Murim Alliance for leaving behind such invaluable records." The Chronicle of Jianhu Elixirs clearly stated the 10,000-year fire ginseng triggers a complete physical rebirth and vastly enhances internal energy. It is guarded by the human-faced spider, a monster with an incredibly resilient carapace, yet its surrounding webs are highly flammable. One need only employ a fire attack while the beast is feeding to easily slay it. Charred, and finished off with a fatal strike straight to the center of its head, the beast lay motionless in a pool of viscous, green blood. Damn it! A deafening explosion echoed through the stone cavern, sending showers of dust and debris raining down as Soon stood frozen before a freshly gouged, deep crater. The young man let out a low groan of agony, raising a trembling hand as if trying to cling to the final remnants of his fading strength. Soon's face contorted with fury, and he screamed in absolute helplessness as he felt the flow of internal energy within his body. Still not enough. To think that after consuming the very roots of this precious treasure, my internal energy is only increased by this meager amount. It is truly unbelievable that even after devouring such a wondrous item, I could only absorb this much. As I expected, the cultivation method of the Tai sect is absolute trash, deeply flawed. Or am I the one who is trash? Why Dantian has only expanded by the size of an ant's finest hair. Soon collapsed to the ground, his hands supporting his exhausted body in overwhelming despair. At this rate, his gaze sank. I won't be able to protect the Tai sect from the calamities that are to come. Horrific memories rushed back, conjuring the image of junior sister Hong enveloped in a bloody shroud amidst the brutal battlefield. In the great war of good and evil, low-level martial artists would only be used as cannon fodder. In this lifetime, I must ensure that the disciples of the Tai sect do not die a meaningless death. But to achieve that, I must become a core figure of the Murim Alliance before the Great War of Good and Evil begins. That is the only way to protect the Tae sect. The first step is to enter the Murim Academy within a year, and yet. Soun clawed violently at the hard stone floor until his fingers bled, his nails digging deep into the cracks of the rock. At this rate, I won't even be able to enter the academy. If that happens. His face twisted in sheer panic, his bloodshot eyes wide with terror at the prospect of repeating his past failure. Nothing will change. The steady dripping of water in the cave echoed like a countdown, forcing his mind to race at full speed. I need to increase my internal energy. Just a little bit more. Internal energy. Soun's reflection in the puddle rippled as he grasped a new ray of hope. An elixir. His eyes snapped wide open. That's it. Chil Yum's elixir came from the Mount Hwasak. Yes, it must be around this time. In the past, Chil Yum's father, Eon So, spent a fortune to purchase the Mount Hwasak's elixir, the So Plum Pill, for his son. Memories of his past life flashed back to Yeon Seok clutching his head in tears beside an empty box, while his servant stood nearby, paralyzed with terror. However, just the day before Chil Yeon was to consume the snow plum pill, it vanished without a trace. The identity of the thief was never revealed. Since this incident has not happened yet, I still have a chance. Soun stood amidst the vast expanse of his memory library, his gaze sharp and brimming with determination. Humans always leave traces. I can find it. He looked up at the towering bookshelves in his mind, where all the memories of his past life were stored. No, I must find it. Focusing with absolute concentration, a stream of information surged into his mind. The monthly reports of the Hefi branch of the Murim Alliance. A brilliant red streak, like a guiding arrow, shot through the massive bookshelves of his memory library in search of the information. The red light viewed sharply, weaving through the dense rows of bookshelves to pinpoint a clue. The red arrow struck a glowing ancient tome on the shelf, marking its vital location. If I search thoroughly, there must be a clue hidden somewhere in my memories. Soun stood upon a bridge of light in the center of the colossal memory library, surrounded by a complex web of intersecting red pathfinders. The Murim Alliance entry logs, mission reports. I will piece together all the records I can recall. I will compile them and organize them through deduction. 3 wooden plaques bearing the names of renowned martial artists materialized vividly before his eyes. Sol Chaser Chi Trang Ma, Don At Vu of the 5 Swords of Mount Cain, and Truong Han Kai of the 5 Swords of Mount Cain. Jin Soen clutched the ancient tome tightly with both hands, his face grimly serious as he discovered the key to resolving the issue. Folding his arms, the young man smiled confidently as he realized the unrivaled advantage of his transcendent memory. To think that becoming a walking library would be this useful. Throwing his head back, he laughed like a madman. So useful indeed. I shall gladly take this snow plum pill. Suddenly, the jade dragon bracelet on his wrist vibrated violently. Startled, Soun looked down at the bracelet emitting a strange emerald glow right beside the carcass of the giant beast. Though, he stared closely at the jade bracelet on his wrist, which was radiating continuously fluctuating waves of energy. Why did the jade dragon bracelet suddenly light up? A dense, billowing surge of deep green aura rose from the bracelet, shrouding his entire arm. What is this? Swinging his arm, Soun unleashed a surge of green energy sharp as a sword blade that tore through the air and shot straight toward the human-faced spider. The ferocious power crashed directly into the spider's fiery red demon core, which hung suspended amidst its claws. It began to absorb the entire demon core from the carcass of the beast. Soun watched in astonishment as the jade dragon bracelet, glowing with a brilliant emerald light, enveloped the dark crimson aura of the human-faced spider's inner core. He gasped in shock as the azure dragon wristlet, absorbing the human-faced spider's inner core. A brilliant burst of emerald green light erupted from the bracelet, brightly illuminating a dark corner of the cavern and sending a flock of startled birds fleeing in panic. Soun stood still and endured as the malevolent black mist from the giant spider's carcass was violently drawn into his body. His face hardened as beams of blue light began to radiate from his shoulders, signaling a terrifying transformation taking place within his body. Soun's eyes snapped open, his pupils glowing with a brilliant blue light as if contained a limitless reservoir of energy that had just been unlocked. Soun laughed heartily, clenching his fists in excitement as he felt the surging power coursing through his veins. He exclaimed, "Unbelievable." In the past, it was a trophy claimed from a hard-won battle of countless hardships. The azure dragon wristlet was a relic left behind by the blood demon, one of the guardian Dharma kings of the demonic cult. The bracelet he once wore to commemorate the victory and the sacrifice of his fellow disciples was now miraculously activated in this lifetime. So-eun unleashed a powerful punch into the air. The blow triggered a terrifying explosion of internal energy, shattering the surrounding rocks, and sending debris flying in all directions under the pressure of the ultimate true Kai. The bracelet had completely purified the toxins within the evil core of the human-faced spider it had absorbed. That purified spiritual energy naturally harmonized with the Tae heart method in his body. As a result, indeed, effort reaps rewards. Thanks to the treasure of the demonic cult, his internal energy had grown immensely stronger. At a lavish banquet adorned with red lanterns hosted by the Gairon Merchant Guild, people gossiped animatedly about guild leader Guy using his fortune to buy rare elixirs for his son. They jealously muttered to one another that being born rich truly meant having it all. If one lacked talent, they could simply guile themselves in gold so long as there was free wine to drink. It didn't matter. Smugly raising his hand, Chil Yeon bragged to junior sister Hong about the snowplum pill, a precious elixir second only to the Mount Hwasek's purple cloud pill in its ability to boost internal energy. He laughed arrogantly, boasting that it was an incredibly rare treasure reserved only for successor disciples, yet his father had still managed to procure it specifically for him. Meanwhile, junior sister Hong could only sit in silence, enduring the sheer annoyance. Ignoring the wealthy young master prattling in her ear about the elixir's miraculous effects, Sarayan, the only daughter of the Tae sect leader, merely rested her chin on her hand and sighed in boredom. Her thoughts drifted to So-eun, wondering where that annoying fellow was, and what he was doing right now. Her eyes flickered with sadness as she reminisced about the past. On that fateful day, something had occurred that she could never forget. In her memories, the miserable sight of Chil Hyum being beaten until his head blood surfaced. She blamed herself, thinking that she should have been the one to stand up and face the confrontation that day instead of senior brother Jin, for she was the one meant to shoulder the future of the sect. Following that incident, senior brother Jin had left the Tae sect. She silently cursed him as a blockhead, leaving on his own accord, thinking it was considerate of him, just because the master of the Gairon Merchant Guild came to cause trouble every single day. What a fool So-eun was. Chil Yeon continued to clear his throat and prattle on smugly beside her, completely unaware that junior sister Hong sat there helplessly, silently cursing So-eun in her heart for being such an idiot. Chil Yeon was attempting to strike up a conversation with Sao Lion when a child suddenly rammed into him from behind, cutting his words short. The boy frantically called out to his senior sister. Chil Yeon coughed fitfully while the young junior disciples of the Tae sect happily swept past, plates of food in hand. The boy cried out to his senior sister, Sao Lion. The young juniors crowded around Sao Lion, eagerly offering her a taste of the delicious food. Sprawled on the ground in utter fury, Chil Yeon muttered curses at the wretched brats. Clutching his face, Chil Yeon staggered away, his expression twisted with hatred. He bitterly hissed threats, warning those wretched bastards of the Tae sect to just wait until the banquet was over. Smiling gently, Sao Lion asked her junior brothers why they had brought all the food out here instead of eating in the dining hall. She tenderly urged them to eat, knowing they had only been fed once the previous day. An observant junior caught the subtle shift in her expression. The boy mischievously asked if she was thinking about senior brother So-eun again, causing Sao Lion to freeze mid-action. The young juniors continued to tease her, saying she always fell silent whenever she thought of senior brother So-eun, despite usually being the loudest of them all. Blushing crimson with embarrassment, Sao Lion shouted angrily to scold the rascals. One junior anxiously asked if senior brother So-eun had eaten dinner, suggesting they save some rice cakes for him. The other boy, eyeing the delicious plate of meat, muttered that since senior brother loved this dish, he would wait for him to return to eat together instead of eating it alone. Sao Lion stood in silence, gazing at her sweet juniors. Her eyes softened, and a warm yet melancholy smile brushed her lips. She suddenly took a massive bite, chewing noisily to the utter bewilderment of her juniors. The children could only weep, crying out in protest to their senior sister. To dispel the heady atmosphere, Sao Lion loudly threatened that if they did not eat right away, she would snatch everything and devour it all herself. Fearing their food would be snatched away, the two boys immediately stuffed their mouths and devoured their portions in a frantic rush. Sao Lion burst into laughter at her junior's adorable antics. Yet, she soon sighed, wondering where So-eun was and what he could possibly be doing to abandon the children here like this. She silently cursed him, calling So-eun a massive fool. Night quickly descended, the brilliant full moon hanging high in a star-studded sky, casting its light alongside the vibrant glow of crimson lanterns. Within the bustling banquet hall, President Yeon Suk stood on high, arrogantly raising his cup in a toast to the raucous cheers of the guests below. Graceful dancers clad in traditional attire moved elegantly, performing exquisite dances amidst a romantic flurry of falling blossoms. Amidst the lively festivities, footsteps as light as flying swallows glided swiftly across the tiled roofs of the compound. A masked shadow darted at breakneck speed, leaping across the rooftops toward the chamber where the treasure was hidden. The intruder landed silently and swiftly drew his weapon, poised for action in the dead of night. A masked thief darted through the dark canopies of the trees, a smug smirk on his face as he made off with the precious treasure. And Mo, the infamous soul chaser, laughed arrogantly while clutching the red brocade box. He sneered, "So this is the legendary spiritual elixir of Mount Hua. It seems even the secret vault of the Gyraon Merchant Guild is nothing special." Curiously, he opened the lid of the brocade box to inspect it. The round snow plum pill radiated a mesmerizing, pale pink spiritual aura. Beholding the priceless elixir before his eyes, the thief's entire body trembled violently with sheer ecstasy. He laughed greedily, muttering to himself that if he consumed this, he would possess enough internal energy to master the secret technique of the Haoshan divine palm. Sensing the danger lurking in the shadows, he reminded himself to make a swift escape to avoid detection. Out of nowhere, a razor-sharp sword strike tore through the air, and fresh blood instantly sprayed across the darkness. Jaimok's head was severed from his shoulders, tumbling to the ground alongside his lifeless corpse. Behind him, the figure of a swordsman stood looking on in icy silence. A hand reached down to retrieve the blood-stained red brocade box. The man softly murmured, "Goodness, I apologize for this. But I have need of this." His cold, sharp gaze fell upon the brocade box in his hand as he softly added, "After all, I need this elixir just as much as that thief did." The tale rewinds to a few days before the theft of the snow plum elixir, inside a shop that sold hunting gear. Upon the wooden walls of the shop hung hunting bows of all sizes, meticulously arranged in neat rows. In the center of the shop hung a massive, imposing black bear pelt, behind which a burly shopkeeper sat in deep contemplation behind his wooden counter. The shopkeeper's sharp eyes flashed with a scrutinizing gaze the moment his ears caught the sound from the entrance. So-eun stepped inside, explaining that he had sought out this place upon hearing whispers of the rare wares the master of the shop possessed. Wearing an enigmatic smile, the youth asked point-blank if the shop purveyed traps specifically designed to capture humans. Slightly taken aback by the bizarre inquiry, the shopkeeper plunged his dagger into the wooden table and chuckled softly, remarking that the youth was indeed an intriguing guest. Thumping his chest with pride, he declared this to be the finest hunting emporium at Hefi, stocked with traps for everything from the smallest hare to the grandest bear except for men. So-eun placed a heavy purse onto the table, requesting a few traps fit for tigers or bears. The shopkeeper questioned him in surprise, concerned that such traps would ruin the beast's precious pelt. So-eun's gaze reflected off the razor-sharp steel jaw of a bear trap. He replied coldly that the pelt concerned him not, he merely required a trap sensitive enough to snap shut at the slightest touch, and powerful enough to crush a bear's leg. A sly smile played on So-eun's lips as he stroked his chin in calculation. He mused to himself that there was no need for ostentatiousness, it only needed to be deadly enough to send his foe to the afterlife in a single blow, and he chuckled quietly with smug satisfaction. Cold sweat beaded on the merchant's brow as he beheld the terrifying expression of the guest before him. Drawing upon 27 years of experience and sharp intuition, he thought to himself that he truly ought not to sell these items to this man. Back in the silent, dark depths of the forest, a figure clad in white stood with his back turned, clutching a crimson wooden box. At his feet lay a lifeless corpse in a pool of blood. The white-clad man sneered in contempt. He had thought the fallen warrior would prove a troublesome adversary, especially given the formidable reputation the man had carved out for himself in the Jianghu. He cradled the blood-stained crimson treasure box in his hands, his face bathed in supreme triumph over the prize he had just seized. From behind, a boot of black leather stepped forward, treading upon a discarded human skin mask on the ground. The newcomer burst into booming laughter, showering his senior brother with praise, saying he was truly worthy of his reputation. Two members of the Dianking Five Swords, Han Kai and Ye Yu, stepped into the light. Han Ki, resting his blade upon his shoulder, scoffed that it had been far too easy, while Ye Yu laughed aloud, mocking the futile anxiety they had harbored. Turning his head, the senior brother coldly proposed disposing of the corpse first. He wanted the soul-chasing guest, to be deemed missing for a time to deflect any suspicion. Eagerly, Unki requested a glimpse of the precious snow plum elixir before they cleared the battlefield, a plea to which the senior brother readily assented. The crimson wooden box was flung open, releasing a radiant pinkish-purple glow, and a mystical mist that left his accomplices wide-eyed, gasping in sheer exhilaration. With such a vibrant hue, and the rich scent of plum blossoms, this is undoubtedly Mount Hwa's snow plum elixir we have sought. From behind them, Soun materialized like a phantom, his voice drifting through the air. But there are two mouths to feed, and only one snow plum elixir. How, then, shall you divide it? Both Dian King disciples gasped in shock, their eyes widening in utter disbelief, as an unfamiliar voice resonated right beside them, completely undetected. A masked figure in black suddenly swept past with the speed of a howling gale, leaving the two disciples to shriek in terror as they stumbled backward in sheer panic. Clad in black with his face concealed, Soun smirked, the snatched wooden box resting in his hand. The Daikang disciple was struck by absolute dread, unable to comprehend how their foe had drawn so incredibly close undetected. Junior brother, capture that thief this instant. You do not need to tell me twice, senior brother. Han Kai lunged forward, blade brandished, his face twisted with murderous intent as he roared, telling his opponent to pay the price for daring to cut at what was far beyond his reach. Evading the strikes with fluid grace, Soun mocked their shamelessness aloud, questioning if such dishonorable ways were indeed the teachings of Diankang Mountain. Yourselves were the ones who stole it first. Han Kai unleashed a ferocious overhead slash, but like a flash of lightning, Soun slipped aside, evading the blade by a mere hair's breadth. The Diankang disciples' missed strike slammed violently into the earth, carving a deep fissure and sending dirt and debris flying, while Soun landed gracefully at a safe distance. And I'm warning you beforehand, he announced suddenly, watch your step. The razor-sharp iron bear trap snapped shut with a savage crack, sinking straight into his leg as fresh blood splattered everywhere. The swordsman's face contorted in sheer agony, his eyes widening in utter disbelief at what was unfolding. Soun narrowed his eyes slightly at his snared prey, marveling inwardly at what a grand bargain this was. Cold sweat poured down the swordsman's forehead as he gritted his teeth, enduring the bone-chilling agony radiating from the iron trap. A wretched scream tore through the silent night air, echoing across the desolate forest. Junior brother. I just told you to watch your step, his companion cried out in horror, as he saw his sect brother collapse. I know not who you are or whence you came, but you are a truly contemptible coward. To call yourself a swordsman, yet resort to such vile, underhanded tricks. If you value your life, remove that mask and state your identity this instant. Soun leaned down slightly to pick up a sharp stone from the ground, preparing his next move. Such as which sect I belong to, or whose disciple I am. Is that what you wish for me to say? I'll arch it. Soun clicked his tongue in disdain at his opponent's dogmatic words. Another iron trap suddenly sprang from the dry leaves, clamping shut around the stone he had just tossed. The man watched in shock as the stone was crushed to powder. His face turned deathly pale. I am the new master of the snow plum elixir, and the two of you shall be imprisoned as the assassins who murdered the soul chaser. How does that sound to you? Curious as to how I know the identity of the true culprit, I stumbled upon a peculiarity, while reviewing the records of the soul chaser, Shreinmo, alongside two members of Mount Kangshan's Five Swords Het Vu, and Han Kai. The truth is, every single trace of the soul chaser vanished entirely the moment the snow plum elixir was stolen. Yet, no newly risen master emerged who seemed to have consumed the snow plum elixir. I combed through the records of every martial artist whose internal energy showed even the slightest increase during that period. And lo and behold, I caught their scent. It is highly probable that the soul chaser was murdered and buried to silence him forever. Assuming at least two people divided the snow plum elixir and absorbed it. Though the medicinal potency was too small to draw public attention, the only ones whose internal energy spiked simultaneously for no apparent reason were two of the Kangshan Five Swords Nat Vu and Han Kai. It seems you know who we are. Of course I know you. The two of you are two of the Five Swords of the Kangshan sect. He snarled aggressively. Even if you know that, what of it? Nat Vu glared, roaring in fury. Are you not afraid of the great Kangshan sect, and the martial alliance? Soun narrowed his eyes in biting sarcasm. I never expected a thief to complain about another thief they crossed paths with, while on the job. Han Kai unleashed a devastating punch to shatter the obstacles, howling, these petty tricks. Do you honestly think they will work on me? Soun swiftly leaped backward, evading the flying debris and a hail of iron traps hurtling through the air. Wearing a triumphant smirk, Han Kai confidently brushed aside the obstructing iron traps as though they were mere child's play. Soun flipped through the air to dodge a newly sprung iron trap, muttering under his breath, damn it. Han Kai pointed his sword straight ahead, radiating murderous intent. Next, I shall rip off that mask and tear your limbs apart. Prepare yourself. From behind, Netvu cheered triumphantly. Well done, junior brother. Soun remained silent, his cold gaze concealed behind his black mask as he silently calculated his next move. Seeing their foe suddenly turn and flee, the two assassins gave hot pursuit, roaring, "Are you running away? Junior brother, after him." Anki, sharp-eyed, spotted something amiss and hurriedly warned, "Careful, senior brother. He is heading toward another leaf-covered area. There must be traps there too." Yewu sneered with confidence as he saw the clear footprints pressed into the carpet of leaves. "We only need to step exactly where his footprints are. What are you worrying about?" Hearing this, Hunkin nodded in admiration, and quickly followed. "Indeed, my brilliant senior brother." The three silhouettes darted swiftly through the dense forest. The two assassins of the Dianking sect carefully placed their feet precisely where Soun had just stepped to avoid triggering the hidden traps. Yewu laughed heartily with smug satisfaction as the distance closed. "What a pity, your petty tricks are useless." Suddenly, Soun stamped his foot hard and leaped high into the air. He landed upon the ground with immense grace and stability, while the other two continued to rush forward with unstoppable momentum. Yewu laughed savagely. "How is it? Have you finally begun to realize your situation?" Hun Ki chimed in, dripping with murderous intent. "Your life ends here." But they remained utterly unaware that the footprint they had just stepped on was, in truth, a colossal iron bear trap waiting to crush its prey. Soun's cold, sharp eyes narrowed calculatingly beneath his black mask. He slightly lowered his head, concealing a smug smile behind the mysterious black cloth. A dry, metallic snap echoed through the silent night as the massive iron trap suddenly sprung shut. Yewu's face distorted completely in sheer horror as he realized he had stepped into a death zone. The boundary between life and death had never been so fragile as fresh blood began to splatter. Both disciples of the Dianking sect collapsed to the ground, groaning in agonizing pain as their legs were crushed by the iron bear traps, unable to believe what was happening. Looking down from above, Soun slowly drew his sword from its scabbard and said, "How surprising, you are smarter than I thought. Move it only by following my footprints." That was almost the correct answer. But unfortunately, the one thing you missed was that you had to step precisely where I walked, perfectly and without a millimeter of deviation, amidst these dense traps. He chuckled with quiet mockery. Drenched in sweat, Yewu roared in despair, "This is madness. It makes no sense. If you laid down traps this dense from the very beginning." Glaring at the masked figure, he shrieked, "How on earth could you walk through them so flawlessly?" Soun lightly touched the hilt of his sword and calmly replied, "That is because of my memory." Pointing the gleaming tip of his sword at the two defeated foes, he continued, "The only gift the heavens bestowed upon me." A single, decisive strike sliced through the air, silencing all resistance in the cold night. The scene shifted to a grand pavilion, where someone softly inquired, "The Tei sword sect of Hefei, you say?" A hand gently lifted a steaming teacup, accompanied by a soft hum of deep contemplation. Su Ming, the chief strategist of the Murim Alliance, took a sip of tea and asked, "Ah, are they not one of the 108 peaks?" Tai Yuan, an elder of the Murim Alliance, smiled slyly and replied, "Exactly, chief strategist. However, have there not been many other powerful sects emerging in Hefei as well?" Tai Yuan continued with an insinuating suggestion, "It is time we gradually replace them with a new P." Su Ming merely listened in silence. Taking another sip of tea, Su Ming slowly spoke, "If it is a sect expanding its influence in Hefei, do you mean the Iron Sword sect? It seems the rumors circulating within the Murim Alliance are true." Dai Yuan eagerly poured more tea and asked, "These tea leaves were specially prepared for you, chief strategist. Is it to your liking?" Yet, in his heart, Su Ming had long since seen through the rumors that Tai Yuan was backing the Iron Sword sect. You know full well that the rules state the sects of the 108 peaks cannot be replaced unless they commit a heinous crime. Do not tell me. Has the Tei sect committed some wrongdoing? Oh, in truth, the Tei sect has abused their privileges too. I have heard they are exploiting them for commerce. Do you mean to say that Tei sect is using the privileges of the 108 peaks just to satisfy their own insatiable greed? Outside the chamber, a small bird perched upon a branch, singing sweetly amidst the serene and endless rolling mountains. Inside the tea room, a heavy, suffocating silence stretched on. The veiled man remained utterly quiet, offering no reply. Please do not misunderstand. I have absolutely no intention of bringing this up merely to force another sect into the 108 peaks. However, he slightly narrowed his eyes, revealing a calculating and sinister glint in his gaze. Is the reason the Wulin Alliance granted privileges to the 108 peaks? Not to honor those who fought alongside us during our darkest and most perilous hours of the past. It is just that. Seeing those sacred meanings slowly fade. As a member of the Wulin Alliance, it truly breaks my heart. In the quiet of the night beneath a starry sky, the inn-boy slumped his head upon a wooden table in the courtyard, filled with sorrow over the day's dismal sales. Meanwhile, Soun was in a state of intense concentration, sweat pouring like rain as a shroud of azure true kai began to envelop his body. A surging tide of power erupted from his dantian, spreading across his tone, bare back as his muscles quivered violently under the staggering pressure. An excruciating wave of pain washed over him, forcing him to grit his teeth in endurance, sweat streaming relentlessly down his chiseled face. Suddenly, he snapped his eyes open, his pupils burning with fierce determination. The tempest of massive energy around him slowly receded and stabilized, enveloping his cross-legged figure. The snow plum elixir truly lives up to its reputation. I'd have now accumulated over half a Gia's worth of cultivation. Finally, it surpassed even the internal cultivation of my past life. Rhythmic footsteps echoed softly upon the wooden stairs of the inn in the dead of the silent night. Soun stepped down into the deserted main hall, calling out softly to the dozing inn-boy to ask for some food. Pardon the intrusion. Startled by the voice, the inn-boy awoke with a jar, rubbing his eyes as he looked at the esteemed guest, and stammered, "Yes, thumbing. Ah, young master, you have finally emerged." The young boy anxiously blurted out, "You hadn't stepped outside for days. I feared something terrible had happened to you." Soun offered a wary smile in response. "Indeed, quite a few things have transpired. Just bring me something to eat. Anything will do." Hearing his guest's request, the inn boy grimaced in hesitation, seeing how late the hour was. He cried out in alarm, "What? At this hour? The kitchen is already closed. I will reward you handsomely. Ah, and I shall also pay a week's worth of lodging and meals in advance." At the sight of the glittering silver coins on the table, the inn boy's eyes lit up instantly. He scrambled to wake the cook, shouting, "That lazy cook, sleeping so early. I shall go drag him out of bed this instant." Soun rested his chin on his palm, and smiled in amusement. Indeed, there was nothing in this world that money could not buy. Soun felt fortunate that he had utilized the Azure Dragon bracelet to secure some emergency funds beforehand. The vision of a colossal, fiercely roaring tiger flashed across his mind. This legendary Azure Dragon bracelet did not merely hold power over ferocious magical beasts. A mystical, emerald green energy swirled violently around his wrist. It possessed the ability to extract the life force of any living creature, purifying and absorbing it directly into the wielder's true kai. Soun stood tall and imposing beside the carcass of the gargantuan tiger he had just slain in the deep forest. "I came here to sell the tiger hide." The hide itself was merely an additional reward. Returning to reality, Soun sat in deep contemplation at the dining table. He murmured to himself, "Well, finding a way to make money is indeed a good thing, but the problem lies here." The sinister power of the Azure Dragon bracelet could easily lead others to mistake him for a disciple of the demonic cult. The phantom of the giant spider, brimming with demonic energy, loomed in his mind like a chilling warning. This transformed the treasure into an extremely hazardous source of power, if exposed to the world. Soun swallowed hard, cold sweat breaking on his brow at the thought of the unimaginable consequences. One of the 10 great forbidden arts decreed by the Murim Alliance was the heaven-devouring art. Yet, the power of the Azure Dragon bracelet looked identical to it. If the Murim Alliance were to discover this, it would not just be him. Everyone in my sect will also be placed in mortal peril. I absolutely cannot allow myself to be caught. Cutting through Soun's anxious train of thought, the waiter eagerly rushed out carrying 2 trays piled high with food. He cried out joyfully, "Young master, your food has arrived." "How is it, sire?" Our chef truly poured his heart and soul into this dish. "Oh, it looks delicious. Thank you for the meal." Soun dug heartily into his noodles, but he soon noticed the waiter still lingering awkwardly by his side with a curious expression. He wondered, why hasn't he left yet? Young master, have you heard the latest rumors?" "What rumors?" The waiter leaned close to Soun's ear, whispering while the young man slurped his noodles. He asked if Soun knew that the Gaireon Merchant Guild had recently hosted a banquet after acquiring an extraordinarily precious elixir, but added that there was a shocking twist to the tale. The waiter's sudden shout made Soun jump and startle, a long strand of noodle dangling from his mouth. He was struck with utter shock as the boy revealed that the elixir had been stolen right in the middle of the banquet. The boy continued to analyze with an air of wisdom, noting that to steal such an elixir without leaving a single trace in such a crowded place, the culprit must surely be a master. Regardless, the Murim Alliance had already dispatched an investigation team because of it. Upon hearing that the Murim Alliance was actively trying to capture the culprit, So-eun immediately choked on his bra, coughing violently until his face flushed red. Panicking, the waiter handed him a cup of water, asking if the young master was alright and urging him to drink. Waving his hand to signal he was fine, So-eun told him to continue, eagerly pressing for details on what the Murim Alliance had done. While the waiter was still stammering, beads of sweat rolled down So-eun's face as he barraged him with questions, demanding to know if the Murim Alliance had found any evidence or if they had already apprehended the thief. His face turned pale, and his pupils dilated in sheer panic at the thought that if they had indeed caught the culprit, it would lead to great trouble. Knowing he was the true culprit, he wondered if they had arrested an innocent soul. Fortunately, the waiter quickly reassured him, stating they had reported that the trail went cold instantly, making it impossible to locate the perpetrator. Hearing this, So-eun let out a long sigh of relief, feigning sympathy by patting his chest and clicking his tongue, remarking that the elixir's owner must be utterly devastated. Indeed, the banquet had to be cut short because of it, which is a shame as we lost quite a few patrons. But fortunately, another feast is about to be held in Hefei. Another feast. Is it hosted by the Gyereong Merchant Guild? No. The next venue is at the Iron Sword sect. The moment the waiter finished speaking, So-eun's face froze instantly, his eyes widening in sheer horror as he heard. The boy excitedly related that they would host a grand banquet lasting 7 days and 7 nights to celebrate the 60th birthday of the Iron Sword sect leader. Since this was peak season for the inn, he was eagerly anticipating it, a hopeful smile gracing his lips. So-eun lowered his head, his gaze darkening as he recognized this fateful timeline, whispering to himself that it must indeed be around this very time. The news that reminded him of the Iron Sword sect leader's 60th birthday celebration. From the dark memories of his past life, a figure knelt prostrate in a pool of fresh blood, his head pressed against the cold stone floor in utter humiliation beneath a blazing red number 60. So-eun bitterly recalled his past life, where his revered father, the leader of the Tae sect, had to endure the greatest humiliation of his existence. He had been forced to kneel before a countless crowd, enduring the contemptuous stares and venomous insults of the world. That heartbreaking event had transpired right at the 60th birthday celebration of the Iron Sword sect leader, in full view of the assembled martial artists of the Jianfu. His father had been forced to kowtow and begged the Iron Sword sect leader for forgiveness, and all of that humiliation stemmed from a single, sole reason. All of that tragedy and disgrace had been because of him. So-eun, the prodigal, ruinous son of his past life. His hand clenched in fury, blue veins bulging tightly. This time, the young man sat with his back turned, a solitary figure in the darkened room, silently steeling his resolve. I must avoid the Iron Sword sect at all costs. The inn boy stared blankly at the back of the guest who had just stood up. Thank you for the meal. With resolute steps, he headed toward the door, leaving behind the bewildered call of the young waiter. Young master. I cannot allow father to suffer such humiliation, because of me. He leaped through the grand gates, his long hair and robes fluttering in the wind. I will not endure this ever again. Or so I once thought. Then why on earth am I in the middle of a duel like this? The clash of their blades erupted in a shower of sparks, unleashing a tempest of force that ripped through the surrounding air. A fierce battle raged in mid-air against the grandson of the Iron Sword sect leader. And of all places, right at the sect leader's 60th birthday banquet. A few days prior, at the Tae sect under a pristine blue sky, the disciples were diligently practicing their swordplay in the courtyard. Exhausted, a disciple collapsed onto the stone steps, his limp hands drained of all strength. Sigh. My legs are completely dead. The 3 gold-silver bronze brothers, the youngest Lee Dongryong, the second Lee Yunho, and Lee Gyunbyo, were sprawled on the ground, gasping for breath after their grueling training session. Chugging water, Lee Yunho complained about the harsh regimen under the sweltering heat. Swinging 100 times in this weather. Is this really helping us master the lesser heavenly sword art? The one beside him clicked his tongue, teasing his younger brother. Lee Gyunbyo grinned triumphantly, pointing a mocking finger and sending a crimson blush rushing to Lee Yunho's face as he vehemently denied it. And where did the guy who said he wanted to be as cool as senior brother So-eun go? When did I ever say senior brother So-eun was cool? I only said that, as a fellow disciple of the Tae sect, I felt proud when he defeated senior brother Cheol Yeon, and mastered the lesser heavenly sword art. Saying that is no different from calling him cool. Still, I wonder what senior brother Soun is up to right now. Clutching his wooden sword to his chest, the youngest, Li Donryon, wore an expression of deep anxiety. Isn't this the first time this has ever happened? He hasn't returned for over a week, and he didn't even leave a word about where he was going. Memories of the intense duel between Soun and Chil Yeon flashed through their minds. Could it be that he's staying away on purpose because he feels awkward about defeating senior brother Chil Yeon? Li Yunho suddenly voiced a theory that made all of their faces pale. Do you think he left the sect for good, fearing that the Gairong Merchant Guild would retaliate against us for what he did? Startled, Li Qianbio gasped in disbelief. What? The youngest, Don Riyong, let out a regretful sigh, earning speechless glares from his two older brothers. After all, senior brother Soun could be a bit troublesome at times, but he really is a good person. Why are you talking about him like he's dead? The youngest blinked in pure innocence. Looking up at the clear sky, the young disciple's face lit up as he cheered in excitement upon spotting a familiar figure returning. It's senior brother Jin. The wooden plaque bearing the words Tae-sect hung majestically over the main gate. Slinging a massive white sack over his shoulder, Soun strolled through the wide-open wooden gates. Finally home. Soun pondered, his gaze sharp and serious. If I do not go to the Iron Sword sect this time, father won't be mocked and forced to apologize. However, that was just one of the many ways they humiliated me. Even after that, the entire Tae sect continued to endure countless insults, both big and small. He brought his foot down firmly upon the stone pavement with absolute resolve. There is no need to overcomplicate things. The Tae sect plaque shone majestically under the brilliant sunlight. I will not go to the Iron Sword sect. He knit his brows in deep thought, beads of sweat glistening on his forehead. Not just me, the entire Tae sect must not attend the Iron Sword sect leader's 60th birthday banquet. As he stood lost in thought, a loud shout from afar startled him, drawing his attention. To achieve that, I need a perfect excuse. Oh, it's senior brother Jin. The three young disciples rushed over in a hurry to greet him. Senior brother Jin, where on earth have you been? Soun chuckled warmly, waving his hand. Well, if it isn't the gold silver bronze brothers. Did you all come out to welcome me because I've been gone too long? The children crowded around him, cheering boisterously. Even the other junior brothers came out to greet me. I'm deeply moved. Senior brother Jin. Senior brother. I'm practicing the lesser heavenly sword art again. Senior brother Jin. Please teach me that move. The one you used to defeat Chil Hyam. Soun gently patted the heads of the two smiling children. Is everyone doing well? Have you been listening to the hall leaders? The children chimed in unison, bursting with excitement. Yes, of course we have. From behind, a tall figure radiating a torrent of murderous intent stared down at him. Soun, you little brat. Meanwhile, he was still lightheartedly chatting with the children. Senior brother Jin. Senior brother Jin. Yes. Have you guys eaten yet? The outer hall leader of the Tae sect, who was also his father, Daesun, stood with his arms crossed, roaring in fury. Where in the world have you been wandering off to, and only now do you decide to drag your miserable bones back here? His junior sister, standing behind, could only call out softly in concern, Senior brother Jin. Soun's face instantly changed, his eyes welling with tears of deep emotion like a child. Father. He rushed forward, arms flung wide to embrace his father, freezing the old man in utter shock. What on earth is this? Why is he acting as if we are having a tearful family reunion after years of separation? Father. Never did I think I would want to hug you this much. Oh, this second life is truly a wondrous thing. Before he could even lay a hand on his father, a devastating fist struck straight down upon Soun's head, screwing his face up in sheer agony. Veins bulging on his forehead, Daesun relentlessly scolded his son, who was clutching his head and enduring the onslaught. You little brat. Do you think playing the fool will let you escape the responsibility of cleaning up the mess you made? Because of the trouble you stirred up with the Gairong merchant group, the entire Tae sect was almost thrown out onto the streets. The other hall leaders are raising hell, demanding that I drag you by the neck and smash your skull open right this instant. Standing to the side, witnessing this scene of domestic violence, So Ryan could only break into a cold sweat and shake her head in exasperation. I think his head was already broken to begin with. From outside, Chil Hyong stormed in, his face contorted in rage. As that bastard Soun returned, he pointed a finger straight at Soun's face, shouting a fierce challenge in front of Tyson. I've been waiting for you, Soun. What kind of underhanded trick did you use last time? This time, let's have a fair fight. Sowoon muttered his name under his breath. Senior brother Chil Yeom. The corner of Sowoon's lips curled up into a dangerous smile, as if a prey had just walked straight into his trap. Sowoon pretended to shield his eyes with his hand, crying out, "Ah, it's too bright." Chil Yeom barked in irritation, asking what the hell he was doing. Sowoon continued his dramatic act, planning he couldn't look directly, because he was blinded by Chil Yeom's aura of a master, praising the miraculous, unbelievable effects of the snow plum pill. He even added a jab, asking how he could ever defeat someone as powerful as him. Hearing this, Chil Yeom was utterly shocked and infuriated. Chil Yeom's face flushed red with rage. He gnashed his teeth, pointing at Sowoon as he stammered, "You." Chil Yeom screamed, "That's none of your business." Before storming off in a huff, Seb Rayan anxiously asked, "Why did you provoke him? Didn't you hear that the snow plum pill was stolen?" Sowoon grinned slyly, and replied, "Of course I did. That's exactly why I brought it up." The sect leader sighed and asked Sirayan, "Why has this brat been acting so strangely lately?" She shook her head helplessly, saying, "I don't know, he's always been a bit eccentric." Meanwhile, Sowoon ignored them completely, cheerfully waving the children over and asking them to guess what their senior brother had brought back for them. The children cheered in excitement upon seeing the bag full of sweets, which even included pulled taffy, asking if they could really eat all of this. Sowoon smiled warmly, reminding them to share it equally, and warning that anyone who hoarded it for themselves would be in trouble. The sect leader scolded Sowoon in anger, "If you have money, you should buy rice. Why on earth did you buy sweets?" So Rayan looked at the expensive pile of confections, wondering, "Where did you get the money to buy these?" Sowoon simply told her to nag less and have some herself. So Rayan fell silent for a moment before softly saying, "Never mind. Just don't suddenly disappear like that again." She muttered under her breath, blaming him for being a fool who only thought of the Tai sect even when he was away. Sowoon asked blankly, "Right now, the Daryeon merchant group is incredibly busy dealing with the snow plum pill incident and preparing for the birthday banquet of the Iron Sword sect's leader, so they barely visit the Tai sect anymore. The sect leader also said we no longer need to bow and scrape before them over that matter. So, you don't have to shoulder everything on your own." Se Rayon suddenly lifted her head, crying out with deep emotion, demanding that Sowoon never suddenly vanish like that again. Sowoon looked at his junior sister with touched eyes, softly calling out, "Junior sister." Internally, Sowoon thought that he had never once bowed and scraped, nor had he ever shouldered anything by himself. But seeing her suddenly being so unusually kind, he decided not to bother correcting her. "By the way, only the Daryeon merchant group is attending the Iron Sword sect leader's birthday banquet, right?" "Oh. I heard that our Tai sect will be attending as well. We're doomed. It's already been decided." Although the sect leader hesitated, to not attend without a valid reason would be highly discourteous. Sowoon clicked his tongue in worry, thinking, no reason not to attend. Damn it, I need to find some kind of excuse. Just then, Tayson silently walked past them with an incredibly solemn expression, leaving both of them staring blankly after him. "I will head to the Iron Sword sect. The rest of you shall remain here." "Father." So Rayan wondered what was wrong with her father and why he had suddenly had such a change of heart. Meanwhile, Sowoon heard a noise behind him and turned to see a young disciple timidly calling, "Senior brother Jin." "Here it is. Rice cakes." He looked at his junior brother in surprise, while Sirayan, standing beside him, immediately asked, "Don't tell me. Are these the rice cakes from the Daryeon merchant group's banquet?" Young Donryeon timidly proffered a small, stale rice cake, his voice thick with sorrow as he muttered that he had heard it was a delicacy and had saved it, denying himself just to share it with his senior brother. Yet, seeing the abundance of exquisite sweets his brother had brought back, he asked dejectedly if he should just throw it away. Astonished, Sowoon asked if the boy had truly resisted eating the cake all this time, keeping it solely for his return. Scratching his head with an embarrassed grin, the boy sheepishly confessed that had his senior brother returned but a single day later, he surely would have succumbed to temptation and eaten it. Sowoon's expression softened, a profound warmth laced with poignant pity welling in his eyes at the child's pure-hearted devotion. He murmured softly under his breath, "So, that was it." Without a moment's hesitation, Sowoon snatched the rice cake and popped it straight into his mouth. This sudden, decisive act caused junior sister Serayan, who stood just behind him, to cry out his name in sheer astonishment. Chewing heartily, Sowoon praised its exquisite taste. At this sight, young Dongryeon whimpered in bitter regret, crying out that half of it was supposed to have been his. Soun beamed a radiant smile, offering a flurry of apologies, claiming the cake was simply too delicious for him to stop. To make amends, he generously declared that Dongryong could have the entirety of his own share of the sweets. Young Dongryong's eyes instantly lit up like twin stars, his face a canvas of disbelief mingled with pure ecstasy as he gasped, asking if such a grand promise were truly real. Behind them, the other children scrambled and clamored for the confections in a lively frenzy. Se Rayon watched with a look of concern, before turning to Soun, remarking that a rice cake kept for so long must surely have turned rock hard. Soun asked contemplatively whether, even if they skipped this particular banquet, the Iron Sword sect would continue to summon them to other occasions in the future. Se Rayon blinked in confusion for a moment, before nodding, confirming that if there was a grand celebration, they surely would. Soun clenched his fist, declaring resolutely that he could not allow such humiliation to go on. His words left Se Rayon utterly bewildered, unable to grasp his meaning. If we continue to cower and hide, Soun thought bitterly, the entire sect will suffer 100-fold humiliation, and not even these innocent children will be spared from the cruelty. It is simply too unjust. His expression shifted, a fierce resolve flashing in his eyes as he decisively declared that he had changed his mind and would accompany them all to the Iron Sword sect. On the day of the Iron Sword sect leader's 60th birthday grand banquet, a bustling stream of carriages and travelers lined up, wending their way toward the grand gates of the sect. Amidst the surging throng of guests traversing the stone-paved courtyard, a sudden voice called out Soun's name, causing him to freeze in his tracks. The speaker sternly warned him that there was one absolute command he must obey upon stepping foot into the Iron Sword sect. Soun nonchalantly asked what that might be. Che Seok, the hall master of the Sunflower Hall of the Tae sect, darkened his expression, and emphasized that under no circumstances was Soun to act impulsively. Soun clicked his tongue in annoyance, questioning if the hall master had come in the sect master's stead merely to play babysitter and keep watch over him. Che Seok scolded him for overstepping his bounds and demanded to know why he had suddenly decided to tag along. Soun merely sighed, lamenting that the hall master was far too overbearing. Soun defended himself, arguing that he wished to restrain himself, but knew not what to do if others persisted in provoking him. Che Seok immediately snapped that this was precisely why he had told him to endure, nagging him about causing trouble, and then running away from home like a petulant adolescent. Soun retorted, asking why he cared so much now when he had never bothered about his whereabouts before. He teased that the hallmaster must have spent too much time with his father lately, causing him to nag in the exact same manner. Soun inwardly noted that ever since they had departed the sect, his father had remained chillingly silent. Just then, Che Seok lost his temper and bellowed, demanding that the boy answer him at once. Soun jokingly promised to endure even if his ancestors were insulted, but before he could finish the sentence, Che Seok dealt him a sharp blow to the head. The older man roared, asking if he was going through some rebellious phase, before bringing up how many of his filthy diapers he had changed in his infancy to claim credit. Clutching his head in a grimace, Soun protested indignantly, asking why the man insisted on dragging up such embarrassing childhood memories. A green-robed figure cleared his throat from behind, demanding they clear the path because their companions had already secured a spot for them up ahead. Anchored, Che Seok barked back, asking if their entire entourage intended to shamelessly cut to the front of the line. The man shamelessly reiterated that their people had already reserved their place. Che Seok roared, cursing them as shameless line cutters. Myriad disciples from the opposing group stepped forward, and one of them demanded insolently if the old man knew who stood before him to dare raise his voice so. Raising a hand to stay his disciple, the leader smoothly rationalized that, because their group was exhausted from traveling a great distance, they had sent someone ahead to secure their place. He arrogantly proclaimed his name to be Yang Se of the Green Bamboo Castle. The onlookers gasped in awe upon hearing the name. Zogba, Yang Se advised the Tae sect delegation that if they recognized his esteemed name, they had best know their place and yield to avoid unnecessary trouble. Yang Seok immediately cowered, recognizing them as the most prestigious sect in Nanjing, and hurriedly apologized while clearing the path. Yang Se let out a hearty laugh, praising that at least there was one among them who knew how to behave. Soun stood in silent observation, his gaze cold and sharp as he muttered the name of Thumtruk Castle. In the memories of his past life, Duong Se was the son of the lord of Thumtruk Castle, a worthless wretch through and through. He would later become sworn brothers with Chil Yang, their rotten natures perfectly aligned. In his previous life, it was none other than Duong Se and Chil Yang who had treated the disciples of the Thayat sect with utter disdain, treating them as nothing more than lowly servants. They continued to mock, sneering that the position would sooner or later be snatched away by the Iron Sword sect. Just then, Soun placed his hands on the shoulders of the two disciples, boldly asking which castle they had just spoken of. One of them recognized his robes as those of the Thayats sect, the sect belonging to the 108 Peaks. The other showed blatant disdain, mocking that the Thayat sect was a laughingstock, with everyone in the martial world wondering how such a place could ever be counted among the 108 Peaks. While Hyun Suk and his son were busy currying favor, Soun leaned close to the two disciples' ears. He feigned ignorance, asking if they meant White Bamboo Castle or Red Bamboo Castle, claiming he had never heard of such strange names and demanded they repeat it. The two disciples of Thumtrut Castle jeered at the trembling, fat merchant, mocking the pathetic state of the Thayat sect, only to freeze in their tracks when they caught sight of their uniforms. Hearing his own castle insulted, Duomse spun around, his teeth clenched in sheer fury. Hyun Suk and his son turned pale, stammering as they tried to correct him, stating that their name was Thumtrut Castle. Soun stroked his chin in feigned contemplation, knitting his brows as though desperately trying to recall where he had heard that name before. Suddenly, he exclaimed with mocking provocation, "Ah! Was it perhaps in the late train?" Soun burst into roaring laughter right in the midst of the crowd, completely disregarding their mounting rage. The disciple of Thumtrut Castle was driven mad with rage, his grip tightening around the hilt of his sword until the veins bulged on the back of his hand. In a fit of fury, he unsheathed his blade and lunged forward, intent on cutting Soun down for daring to insult his sect. A clear, authoritative female voice rang out, cutting through the air, and demanding to know the cause of the commotion. The blade was forced to halt mere inches from Soun's face, and the swordsman clicked his tongue in bitter regret. The surrounding crowd gasped in astonishment upon recognizing the newly arrived maiden as the Iron Sword Beauty, her real-life visage far more breathtaking than any rumor had claimed. The woman with elegant pink hair stepped forward. She cast her gaze over the crowd gathered for her grandfather's birthday banquet, and asked. She was none other than the renowned Seon Morin, granddaughter of the sect leader of the Iron Sword sect. Coldly, she continued, "Did you come here hoping to witness bloodshed?" The Iron Sword sect was a formidable power that had risen with immense strength over the past 150 years. As two tigers cannot share the same mountain, a turf war in Fa between the declining Thayat sect and the ascendant Iron Sword sect was inevitable. And the Iron Sword sect harbored but a single objective: to strip the Thayat sect of its position among the 108 Peaks. In his past life, Soun, along with Se Lion and Chil Yeon, had attended the birthday feast, which had resulted in a fierce confrontation. The aftermath of that clash had forced his father, Dai Zan, to kneel and kowtow in apology before the sect leader of the Iron Sword sect in unforgettable, burning humiliation. Returning to the present, Soun's gaze hardened with resolve, as he swore to himself that things would be different this time. Groaning, Moran demanded once more to know why the crowd was causing such a disturbance. She pressed the question, demanding to know if they truly wished to see blood spilled at her grandfather's birthday banquet. Terrified by Moran's overwhelming aura, the disciple of Thumtrut Castle stammered in a desperate attempt to justify himself. He attempted to lay the blame on Soun, but Moran cut him off instantly, boldly declaring that the Iron Sword sect did not tolerate the saving of places, and commanded his group to move to the back of the line. Afterward, Moran turned to introduce herself with humility, offering a sincere apology for the recent interruption. As a small token of amends, Moran offered to personally escort the guests from the Teal sect and the Darion Merchant Guild inside. The entire procession followed behind her, walking along the vast corridor of the Iron Sword sect. Chil Yeon seized the opportunity to sidle up and flatter Moran playfully, praising her as a breathtaking flower among a pack of wolves and indeed a rare beauty. Moran offered a polite response and urged them to quicken their pace, stating that the young sect leader was eagerly anticipating their arrival. Walking behind, Soun silently speculated prior to his regression, Moran had possessed no connection to the Teal sect. He wondered if this was a butterfly effect triggered by his own actions, or if she harbored some other hidden motive. Moran then led them before the grand wooden doors of the banquet hall. So Ryan and Chae Suk marveled in awe at the sheer grandeur and imposing skill of the great hall. Soun maintained a state of high vigilance, reminding himself that this sudden hospitality was undoubtedly suspicious and that he must continue to observe her closely. The interior of the banquet hall was vast and magnificent, echoing with the lively clamor of laughter and conversation. Moran introduced the figure seated majestically at the center as her grandfather, the sect leader of the Iron Sword sect Seon Jeon-wol. Seated beside him was her father, the young sect leader, Seon Jatate. The merchant guild master stepped forward to pay his respects to the sect leader and young sect leader of the Iron Sword sect. Jutak left heartily, telling the merchant guild master not to stand on ceremony, while warmly welcoming Chil Yeon. Jutak flattered Chil Yeon, praising him as a rare talent whose missed recruitment had caused him sleepless nights of regret. Jutak took a deliberate swipe, remarking sarcastically that since the Iron Sword sect lacked the privilege of the 108 peaks, they had no choice but to yield. The merchant guildmaster could only offer a wry smile and remark that he was too kind. Moran stepped forward to tactfully remind her father to also greet the guests from the Taeyil sect. At this, Jutek's gaze shifted instantly, casting a sharp, scrutinizing look over the group from the Taeyil sect. Chae-seok and Tyson introduced themselves in turn as the leader of the Goihwa Hall and the Outer Hall leader. Jutek recognized Chae-seok from a prior encounter at the Maroon Alliance, but upon hearing Tyson's name, Jutak smirked provocatively, dredging up the incident from 20 years ago when Tyson had his sword stripped and was expelled from the sect, causing the atmosphere to instantly grow tense. Jin Soon frowned slightly, a wave of suspicion rising within him upon hearing the man bring up the incident of the past. Pacing forward, the young sect leader of the Iron Sword sect spoke with a patronizing tone, inquiring how sect leader Han had been faring lately, before casting his gaze toward junior sister Han and questioning the identity of the boy beside her. Upon being introduced to the boy as the son of the Taeyil sect's outer hall leader, he clicked his tongue in disdain, mocking the two youths' martial aptitude as utterly mediocre, and sarcastically questioning if these were truly the finest talents this sect had to offer. He prattled on, claiming that staying with the Taeyil sect yielded no future, advising them not to waste their efforts on futile endeavors but instead focus on nurturing Chil Yeon. He emphasized that in nurturing Chil Yeon, they must absolutely avoid teaching him the martial arts of the Taeyil sect. The young sect leader let out a smug laugh, spitting out a venomous insult that he had no desire to see the boy end up as a mere third-rate martial artist. In the midst of his triumphant laughter, a calm, nonchalant voice rang out, comparing him to a common street thug, causing him to whip around in utter shock. With his arms crossed, Soum stared directly at the young sect leader with a cold, piercing gaze, adding that every word spewing from his mouth was grating to the ears. Flushed red with fury, the young sect leader clenched the wine cup in his hand and bellowed, demanding to know what nonsense the brat was babbling. Soum stepped forward at a leisurely pace, feigning contrition as he claimed he had only meant to keep the thought to himself, but had accidentally let it slip aloud, a brazen excuse that only enraged the man further. But in all honesty, is that not the truth? Just moments ago, you addressed my junior sister's father, the sect leader of our Tae sect, the sect leader Han, as though you were equals. You even inquired about his martial cultivation, a matter no martial artist should ever carelessly probe. And finally, did you not parade your supposed wisdom only to demean and dismiss the martial arts of my Tae sect? Upon hearing such words, who would not be provoked to anger? Yes, as the sages teach, we must not return rudeness, even to the arrogant and insolent. This is clearly my failing. I offer my sincerest apologies. What on earth is this? A murmur rippled through the surrounding guests at Soon's sheer audacity. Some even failed to stifle their laughter upon hearing the Iron Sword sect likened to common street thugs. The face of the Iron Sword sect leader was twisted in a dark scowl, his muscles twitching with fury at the sheer insolence of this Tae sect brat. Trembling with rage, the young sect master's face contorted as he gnashed his teeth, spitting out that Soon was nothing but an uncultured brat. Confronting that boiling wrath, Soon remained utterly composed. Cupping his hands, he asked in return if the elder had no intention of accepting his apology. His fury reaching its boiling point, his grip tightened until the porcelain cup in his hand began to crack, emitting sharp, ominous snaps. With a furious roar, he raised his arm, poised to hurl the cup directly at Soon to unleash his wrath. Just as the clash was about to erupt, a disciple rushed breathlessly into the banquet hall, bearing urgent news that the grand strategist of the Martial Alliance had just arrived. Upon hearing that their esteemed guest had arrived, the sect leader of the Iron Sword sect rose instantly, commanding everyone to make haste and welcome him, casting aside all disputes in the hall for the moment. The Martial Alliance has set foot at the banquet. Has the grand strategist arrived already? The crowd scrambled toward the gates, eager for any chance to curry favor with one of the most powerful figures in the martial world. Sect leader, let us go together. We must also hasten to pay our respects. The father and son of the Kilon merchant group also squeezed hastily into the throng, leaving the Tae sect delegation standing bewildered in their wake. Hurry, Hyo-hyun. Come with me. Yes, father. Bring forth the prepared gifts at once. Young sect master Seonju-taek turned away with a resentful scowl upon seeing his spotlight snatched away, while Jin So-eun, standing behind him, could only shrug in wary resignation. Are we not joining them? In any case, hundreds will be clamoring to curry favor with the grand strategist. It is 100 times better for us to head inside and secure a prime seat. Chae-seok ground his teeth, his rough hand snatching Jin So-eun's collar from behind and giving him a sharp jolt. Jin So-eun, you bastard. What in the heavens were you thinking, speaking to the young sect master of the Iron Sword sect in such a manner? How many times have I warned you to know your place? What? Speak the truth. I saw everything from behind when you were speaking to the young sect master earlier. Chae-seok pressed him sternly, as he stared at the hand tightly gripping the sword hilt, leaving the latter struggling to explain. If he had not intervened, would you have drawn your sword? Well, that. If I noticed, then Seonju-taek surely did as well. He was likely goading you in hopes that someone would draw a blade. We were a hair's breadth away from kneeling and begging for forgiveness on our very first day here. Please, do not act so recklessly. Uncle, did you not see that the Iron Sword sect was deliberately trying to provoke us? My point is that we should not court needless trouble, and instead behave as honorably as a true gentleman. You brat, I know that all too well. Jin So-eun questioned his father with utmost seriousness, delving into the secret of the past that Seonju-taek had just unearthed. And what exactly transpired 20 years ago? Father, your expression was dreadfully grim throughout the entire reception. Chae-seok looked toward Tyson, who was shaking his head, a fleeting trace of agony and helplessness crossing his features, as a wound that had never truly healed was ripped open. That is. He let out a heavy, weary sigh, beads of sweat forming on his brow, as the dark memories of 20 years ago came rushing back. Seon Moran suddenly appeared, her radiant smile blooming like a flower as she gracefully dissolved the tense atmosphere between father and son. Why don't we head inside to speak? I shall guide you to an excellent seat. Shall we? Relief washed over Chae-seok's face as he hastily urged Jin So-eun forward, eager not to squander this unexpected hospitality. That would be wonderful, thanked you, lady. She is offering to show us to a prime spot. Are you not coming? We must make haste. The breezy, elevated pavilion overlooked a blooming lotus pond, a prime vantage point reserved only for the most distinguished of guests. It was a pleasant, premium seat offering an unobstructed view of the magnificent lake. The table was laden with a lavish spread of delicacies, from sea cucumbers and steamed fish to steaming, fragrant stews. These were rare delicacies of land and sea that they would normally never have dreamed of laying eyes upon. Why are the people of the Iron Sword sect treating us so well? Is she truly going to sit with us in the front row? May I ask your name, young master? My name is Jin So-eun. But shouldn't you be welcoming the grand strategist of the Martial Alliance? Resting her chin on her hand, she replied, in any case, the clan rules of the Iron Sword sect do not permit women to meddle in great affairs. I will not be punished merely for my absence. The portrait depicted a young man of radiant red hair, wielding a massive and awe-inspiring great sword. This was the blood wolf of the Iron Sword, Seonmo Hyeon. Appearing beside him was a beautiful maiden with a mysterious smile and a sharp blade sheathed at her back, the beautiful wolf of the Iron Sword, Seon Moran. Since childhood, the blood wolf, Seonmo Hyeon, had grown up monopolizing all the resources of the Iron Sword sect, widely regarded as the ultimate successor of the sect. On the other hand, the beautiful wolf, Seon Moran. Despite initiating her inner ki cultivation at the relatively late age of 9, she was a true prodigy, destined to enter the martial academy alongside the blood wolf. Gnawing on a succulent chicken leg, So-eun muttered that rumors claimed the beautiful wolf's fangs were even sharper than the blood wolf's. To be treated with such hospitality by someone of her stature was, from the perspective of the Taeil sect, indeed a promising sign. Seon Moran delicately covered her mouth with a graceful laugh and teased, I never expected you to know so much about me. Do you harbor that much interest in me, young master? So-eun casually replied that he was merely repeating the rumors he had chanced upon. While Chae-seok poured his wine in frustration, questioning whether it was truly wise for them to accept such treatment, Moran offered a soft smile and apologized on behalf of her father for his earlier conduct. Moran explained that due to their past ties with the Gyeryong Merchant Guild, her father had likely acted out of deep sorrow over the loss of his sworn brother, Hyeong. Chewing noisily, So-eun remarked that it was not too late and she was free to take him back, prompting a burst of laughter from her as she accused him of taking the jest too far. So-eun suddenly paused, his expression turning solemn as he posed a question. In any case, there is one thing I am curious about, milady. Looking directly into her eyes, he asked bluntly what intentions the Iron Sword sect harbored in inviting the Taeil sect here, catching Morin slightly off guard. Faced with his sharp inquiry, Morin merely let her lips curve into an enigmatic smile, falling silent for a brief moment. Gently closing her eyes, she countered with a question of her own: is not a banquet most meaningful when many souls gather together in celebration? So Woon lightly wiped his mouth, his gaze turning icy as he warned, yet, history tells us that many a bloody assassination has unfolded in the midst of such banquets. Morin's crimson eyes narrowed slightly, and the atmosphere between them instantly grew suffocatingly tense. Breaking the silence with a soft chuckle, Morin rose to her feet. She remarked that young Master Jin was indeed a fascinating individual, adding that she would have loved to dine with him to dispel his doubts, but her time was short. She politely clasped her hands, bowed, and gracefully excused herself to take her leave. As her footsteps faded into the distance, everyone in the room silently stared after the retreating figure of the scheming young mistress of the Iron Sword sect. So Woon turned his head in confusion, only to find Se Ryan looking away with crossed arms and a sullen pout, leaving him utterly bewildered as to what had just transpired. Outside the brilliantly lantern-lit pavilion, a clamor of young men could be heard, praising Lady Seong's exquisite beauty and agreeing she was indeed as breathtaking as the rumors proclaimed. A troop of finely dressed young noblemen, their faces flushed red with wine, crowded around Morin, eagerly inviting her to join their company. Amidst the bustling banquet hall, the young nobles clamored around Seon Morin with invitations. "Lady Seon, pray accompany me to tonight's banquet." One pleaded. Another cut in, "Oh, you must come with me." Yeah, she merely glided past in silence, leaving behind a trail of dazed and disappointed gazes. A servant's panicked cry rang out in distress, "My lady." The servant scurried frantically about, panting as he called out, "My lady. Lady Morin." He then muttered in distress, "Where on earth could she have gone? The young master is searching for her in earnest." High above them, upon a lofty rooftop, she sat in absolute silence, gazing down at the world below. Basking in the cool night breeze atop the tiled roof, she let out a sigh of relief, finally finding it easier to breathe. Nibbling on a skewered snack, she thought with wary disdain, to think that among so many, there is not a single decent man, let alone a true warrior. But then, the face of Jin So-woon drifted into her mind. She smiled faintly and mused, still, young Master Jin So-woon of the Taeil sect is rather intriguing. His inner kai appears negligible, yet even in the presence of young Saya of Green Bamboo City, or before my father the young sect master of the Iron Sword sect, he never once bowed his head, exuding absolute confidence. Resting her chin in her hand, her eyes sparkled with curiosity. Does he not fear the Iron Sword sect, or is he simply a madman? Suddenly, she froze, as she caught sight of a familiar figure in the courtyard below, gasping softly in surprise. Peering down from her perch, she spotted junior sister Han of the Taeil sect walking alongside Chil Hyam. She wondered, the young lady of the Taeil sect whom I met earlier, and that dog I mean, Chil Hyam, where are the two of them heading? A thought suddenly struck her. Ah, now that I think about it, those people earlier mentioned something about a banquet. Did my elder brother not say that only the younger disciples would gather to drink during the festival? Could that be tonight? Observing the smug look on Chil Hyam's face beside the visibly anxious junior sister Han, she muttered, but why are only the two of them going? Did young Master Jin not accompany them? A knowing smile graced her lips. She whispered softly to herself, this is going to be interesting. A steady knock upon the door shattered the silence, and from within, Jin So-woon called out, "Who is it?" Opening the door slightly, he stood frozen in surprise at the uninvited guest. Seeing Seon Moran at his doorstep, he asked in bewilderment, "Lady Seon, what brings you here at such a late hour?" She offered a polite smile and explained, "Our Iron Sword sect has hosted a banquet for young talents to mingle and forge friendships. I thought it would be wonderful if young hero Jin would join us." Scratching his head, he tactfully declined, "Thank you for your kindness, but I must decline. It has been a long day with far too much happening. Both I and the disciples of the Tae sect are exhausted in body and mind." She chuckled softly, casting a meaningful look at him. "All of you? Is that truly so?" Because mischief gleamed in her eyes as she delivered the shocking news. "I just saw Lady Hom on her way there." Hearing this, his expression instantly shifted in shock. He hurried through the night alongside her, his mind plagued by dark memories of his past life. Before my regression, I fell for Seon Mohyun's provocations at this very banquet, which ultimately led to a duel. As a result, my father and the Tae sect had to endure utter humiliation to settle the matter, as if the duel had never happened, he thought. That is why I tried so hard to avoid attending this time. Jin Soon placed a hand to his chin, his face sullen and calculating. It seems I have no choice but to attend. I cannot leave Se Rayon alone in a place where the Iron Sword sect might have laid a trap. Their footsteps came to an abrupt halt upon a wooden bridge under the silent night sky. Are you suggesting our Iron Sword sect would invite guests only to trap them? He whipped around, meeting her gaze with deep suspicion. Ah, are you truly clueless? Or is your acting ability even superior to your martial arts? But, just like this afternoon, you seem to be harboring an extreme sense of inferiority regarding the Iron Sword sect. Jin Soon stole a glance at Moran, who stood behind him with an innocent facade, his heart filled with doubt. In any case, the rules of the Iron Sword sect forbid women from participating in major affairs. Could it be? She truly has no idea what her people are plotting. Dry leaves rustled in the night wind beneath the starlit sky. It is true we view the Tei sect as a thorn in our side. But even so, the Iron Sword beauty cried out in anger, her purple hair whipping furiously in the wind. The Iron Sword sect does not act like common street thugs. The corner of Jin Soon's lips curled into a cold, mocking smirk. Let me make a prediction. At this banquet, your brother, Mo Hian, will manufacture an opportunity to trample upon the Tei sect. Even if I back down. The night wind blew fiercely, scattering his black hair, his gaze as sharp as a blade. And in the end, he will turn the Tei sect into a laughing stock. Morin turned her face away, her expression a mix of utter disappointment and rage. I misjudged you. I thought you were a righteous man who would not tolerate injustice, but you are nothing but a madman suffering from a persecution complex. Jian Soon turned decisively and walked away, his robes fluttering in the darkness. I hope it is indeed just my delusion. The magnificent pavilion of the Iron Sword sect blazed with brilliant lights, casting its reflection upon the mirror-like surface of the lake. Inside the banquet hall, a disciple clad in green robes held up his wine cup, jeering loudly. Good heavens, do you truly think this is reasonable? That the Tei sect is still considered part of the 108 peaks, while an outstanding orthodox sect like our Iron Sword sect in Fi is not. Chil Hyung sat beside him with a smug smirk, while Se Rayan could only lower her head in silent endurance. Even the outstanding Daeron Merchant Guild couldn't avoid being bound to the Tei sect, all because of that damn special status of the 108 peaks. What a tragic state of affairs. They burst into laughter, their dark faces filled with malice and contempt. Why isn't she saying a single word of protest? Hey, fellow Taoist, it's not that she doesn't want to protest. It's just that she can't. Seo Rayan clenched her fists, her shoulder is trembling with resentment, yet she was powerless to act. Indeed. Is anything I said wrong? They laughed uproariously in triumph. But even so, I am truly delighted. Instead of senior brother Jin, Chil Yeong raised his wine cup in triumph, wearing a sneer of utter contempt. Now then, let us hear the stance of the Tei sect. So Rayan lowered her head, trembling under the suffocating pressure of the offered cup, completely speechless. Stagnant, foul water must be purged for the greater good. Does the Tei sect agree? I was the one who came. Se Rayan stammered in sheer panic, cold sweat trickling down her face. I mean, we. The young girl clutched her robes tightly, her hands trembling uncontrollably under the oppressive weight of the crowd's gaze. We agree with that sentiment. Shin So-eun suddenly materialized and took a seat, sending the man opposite him tumbling backward in utter shock. Is that not the troublemaker from this afternoon? Oh, the fair wolf of the Iron Sword. The crowd erupted into hushed murmurs as Moran appeared, radiating an air of noble elegance. My lady, if you are joining the banquet, please, sit by my side. Moran deftly deflected the lustful young lord's advances. My apologies. I merely came to guide a guest, so I shall take my leave now. Jin So-eun. Why are you with Moran? But Jin So-eun nonchalantly cut off the man still sprawling on the floor. Could you bring another table of wine here? You bastard. Did you not hear what your senior brother was saying? Jin So-eun's lips curled into a mocking smirk. Senior brother. One who sits idly sipping wine while his sect is defamed and his junior sister is humiliated. Is he truly fit to be called a senior brother? Senior brother. Enough. Please stop arguing. Sir Rayan cried out anxiously, trying to diffuse the tension. Senior brother Jin, why are you here? He turned back to her, countering with his own question, and why did you come? Well, I came because I feared you would stir up some other trouble if you attended. So Rayan puffed her cheeks in indignation at her senior brother's teasing. When have I ever caused trouble? In any case, while everyone else is busy mocking the Tei sect, his sharp gaze flickered toward the corner of the hall. Those two had not spared so much as a single glance in their direction. In the distance, the true geniuses of the age converse, utterly indifferent to the commotion around them. The awakened divine dragon, San, eldest son of the Nangun clan and a member of the Dragon Phoenix Coalition, he was hailed as one of the hidden dragons of Enhu, and the blood wolf of the Iron Sword sect, of Kian. Jin Soun's fated enemy from his past life sat there, exuding a cold, arrogant aura. The host of this very banquet. Two invisible currents of martial intent clashed violently in midair. A pity, but it seems my private chat with Morin must wait for another day. In any case, if it isn't Jin Soun of the Tei sect. Now, tell me, was I correct in assuming that you interrupted my conversation with your junior sister? Because you intend to answer on her behalf. The young lord flashed a provocative smile, eagerly anticipating his opponent's reaction. Jin Soun stared back in absolute silence, his face a mask of calm, though a calculating light flickered in his eyes. With nonchalant ease, he picked up a large chicken leg, brandished it triumphantly, and said, I believe I just said we agree. Wearing a solemn expression, he continued to philosophize, a pond can only remain pristine when fresh water flows into it. Jin Soun suddenly tore a massive bite out of the chicken leg, rudely cutting off the other man's impending retort. However, he spoke while chewing sloppily, his voice laced with casual mockery. That is only true on the condition that the incoming stream is clean. Now, take the Green Bamboo Gang here, for instance. A rising power in Anhui province like them should have entered the ranks of the 108 peaks long ago. But why have they not succeeded? It is because the current 108 peaks fawn over the Murim alliance far too much. Jin Soun let out a wicked smile, his cold, piercing eyes tearing open his opponent's deepest, most guarded wound. Oh, it is because of the bloody tragedy that befell the Green Bamboo Gang 60 years ago. Yang Sa's face went completely pale, his eyes widening in sheer terror as his sect's darkest secret was laid bare before the entire assembly. The gruesome specter of the past loomed once more of shattered blades and blood-soaked banners, where brothers of the Green Bamboo Gang turned their swords upon one another, driven to mutual slaughter for the seat of the sect leader. Jin Soun casually poured wine into his cup, his voice dripping with biting irony. Do not misunderstand me. They are, of course, an outstanding and formidable sect. He leisurely emptied his cup amidst the bewildered stares of the crowd. However, if we must wage war against the unorthodox faction, yet I am expected to entrust my back to a band of brothers who turn their blades on one another. Jin Soun slammed his cup onto the table with a sharp, dry clack, his countenance dripping with utter disdain. With a smirk and a mocking wink, he added, I would rather have no part in it. The onlookers gaped in astonishment, unable to believe a mere young disciple dared speak with such audacity and insolence that would undoubtedly disquiet even the Murim alliance itself. Unable to endure the humiliation, Yang Se lunged forward and gripped Jin Soun's collar. To think we took such a sect as a blood alley. You bastard. He roared in fury, his grip tightening as if to crush the collar on the spot. How dare you drag the shame of our Green Bamboo sect through the dirt again? A low, commanding voice echoed from behind, forcing him to freeze. What do you think you are doing? Yang Se stammered and trembled as he beheld the towering figure looming closer. Oh. Blood Wolf Mo Hyan stepped forward with a chilling expression, his gaze as sharp as daggers staring directly at the instigator. Just as you said. How audacious of you to show such disrespect to a guest invited by our Iron Sword sect. Mo Hyan's face darkened, dripping with murderous intent. To do so is to look down upon us as well. Morin spoke up in protest to defend him, only to be instantly cut off by her senior brother. What? Senior brother, what are you saying? Wasn't it the Green Bamboo stronghold that provoked us first? Morin, stay out of this. Mo Hyan pointed his finger directly at his opponent's face, his eyes glinting with malice, while Jin Soun remained absolutely silent. I saw clearly. This fellow deliberately derailed and ruined what was meant to be a constructive discussion. Sir Ryan turned pale, terrified that her senior brother's wrath would ruin everything. She quickly stepped in to take the blame. Well, if senior brother Jin loses his temper here, all will be lost. Mo Hyan, let me apologize in his stead. I am truly sorry. Jin Soun's hand tightened against his knee. He spoke in a lower, self-deprecating tone to diffuse the mounting tension. It seems I have cast a shadow over this joyous banquet. Hyun Soo-eun clasped his hands and bowed in deep humility before the eyes of the assembly. I have no excuses for my behavior, Hyun. Moran's eyes widened in utter shock at his sudden submission. Senior brother. Ignoring his junior sister's bewilderment, Jin So-eun turned to the distinguished guest to offer his amends. I also apologize to young Master Gu for carelessly bringing up your esteemed sect's internal affairs. I was utterly thoughtless. Oh Hyun's cold gaze remained locked on him as Jin So-eun offered to depart. We shall take our leave now, so please quell your anger and enjoy the remainder of the feast. Jin So-eun turned to Lee, gesturing for his junior sister to follow to avoid further trouble. Let us go, said Arion. Flustered, Sarayan complied. Wait. Oh Hyun stood tall behind them, his tone heavy with menace and caution. You have insulted a distinguished guest of the Iron Sword sect on our very ground. If we let you walk away unscathed, where would our honor stand? Jin So-eun cast a sidelong glance back, sensing the blatant malice radiating from his foe. As a disciple of the Iron Sword sect, and the nephew of the sect leader. Behind him, the disciples of the Iron Sword sect wore sly, smug grins, knowing their prey had walked right into the trap. I cannot simply let this matter slide with a mere apology. Therefore, Mo Hyun cracked his knuckles, a wild, provocative grin spreading across his face. Challenge you to a duel. Morin trembled in fear as she realized all their efforts to avoid conflict had crumbled to dust. It is futile to run. Jin So-eun lowered his head, a soft, dry chuckle of irony and self-deprecation suddenly escaping his lips. The youth threw his head back and laughed aloud, as if everything had finally become clear to him. Trying to stop it is useless. What must happen? A smug, confident smirk broke across Jin So-eun's face as his sharp gaze locked onto Morin. See, I was right after all. Morin watched Jin So-eun's back with mounting dread, even as a cruel fate knocked on their door once more. Will inevitably come to pass. Inside the small meeting room of the guest house, Taeseok, consumed by rage, pointed a finger directly at Jin So-eun's face and bellowed, demanding to know how he could have accepted the challenge, and how he intended to handle the consequences, adding that he should never have attended that banquet in the first place. So-eun, maintaining a calm demeanor, explained that had he not gone, the man would surely have challenged Seo-ryun, and if his uncle wished to blame someone, he should not blame him, but senior brother Guy for dragging her to such a place. Chae-seok's face flushed crimson with fury as he stammered in anger, cursing that insolent brat. Right then, Seo-ryun, standing behind them, bowed her head slightly, and spoke up in his defense, saying that senior brother Jen was correct. Jin So-eun scratched his head and grinned triumphantly, remarking, exactly, Seo-ryun, you understand me. However, she immediately poured cold water on his pride by adding, but you still should have exercised restraint, leaving the young man frozen in bewilderment as he stammered. Seo-ryun continued her anxious analysis, asking him if he believed young Master Seon would be an easy opponent just because he had defeated senior brother Guy, and whether he truly thought their martial arts could stand against the Iron Sword sect. She warned that if he were to be struck by the great sword during the duel, he might truly lose his life. Hearing this, a cold sweat broke out across Seo-eun's forehead. Seo-ryun's face flushed deep red, her eyes brimming with tears before she burst into heavy, trembling sobs, her weeps filled with grievance and overwhelming fear for her senior brother's safety. Seeing the beauty shed tears, Jin So-eun flailed his arms in a frantic panic to comfort her, pleading with her not to cry or worry anymore, reassuring her that he had accepted only because he had a plan, and asking why she was crying when no one was going to die. He even let out a confident laugh, telling her to instead think of how she would congratulate him when he returned victorious. Tae-seok roared furiously in So-eun's face, demanding to know how he could crack such tasteless jokes at a time like this, accusing him of making the girl cry even more. So-eun quickly pressed a finger to his lips, shushing him to signal that they must calm her down first. Helpless, Tae-seok turned to Tae-sun, who sat silently in the dark corner, and raised his voice, asking the outer hall lord if he intended to just sit there and watch, urging him to do something about his son. Tae-sun remained silent, offering not a single word. Jin So-eun turned to his father with an incredibly resolute and serious gaze, imploring him, "No, I can handle this myself, so you do not need to do anything. Please trust me this once and just watch over me, alright, father." He gritted his teeth in sheer anger. Chae-seok spun around and stormed off, muttering in frustration, "Fine, do whatever you want." Tae-sun remained seated in silence, his head bowed in deep thought, while So-eun watched his uncles retreating back. A close-up of Jin So-eun's sharp and unyielding gaze revealed a monumental determination burning within his heart for tomorrow's battle. Tae-san bowed his head, lost in anxious contemplation. His son's reassuring words still echoing in his ears. Father, do not worry too much. Everything will be fine. The following morning, the sky over the Iron Sword sect was clear, yet the wind rustled ominously through the ancient roof tiles, heralding the turbulent day that was about to unfold. So-ryun ran frantically along the corridors of the guest house, calling out loudly for senior brother Jin as she ran. So-eun, who was walking, turned back in surprise and asked, "Junior sister, what has put you in such a desperate hurry?" Out of breath, her face pale with absolute panic, So-ryun stammered, "The outer hall lord. He is..." Hearing those words, Jin So-eun's eyes widened in sheer shock as a profound sense of dread suddenly surged deep within his chest. Without a second's hesitation, Jin So-eun spun around and dashed off like an arrow released from a bow, leaving Se-ryun far behind. In the depths of his mind, a bitter self-reproach echoed, "I told you not to worry precisely because I feared something like this would happen." Today, on the day of the duel at the central martial arena of the Iron Sword sect, his ultimate dread had finally come to pass. At the central martial arena, a clamor arose as a crowd of disciples from various sects gathered, whispering among themselves. They muttered to one another, asking why everyone had assembled in such numbers, to which someone replied, "I heard a disciple of the Tae-heal sect insulted the Iron Sword sect." Mocking laughter erupted, with onlookers scoffing that the brat truly did not know the height of the heavens or the depth of the earth, wondering how the Tae-heal sect dared to insult the Iron Sword sect. They pointed and jeered, noting that his father, the outer hall lord of the Tae-heal sect, was currently bowing his head in apology, and that the generous sect leader of the Iron Sword sect had offered forgiveness if they showed genuine repentance. So that was why. His father was groveling at the feet of the powerful figures of the Iron Sword sect. Upon the high platform stood the two leaders of this formidable power, Ju-tae, the young sect leader of the Iron Sword sect, and Cheon-wol, the sect leader of the Iron Sword sect. Both wore smirks of supreme triumph and disdain. Cheon-wol turned and spoke respectfully to the esteemed guest beside him. "Grand strategist, my apologies for troubling you with such trivial matters." The grand strategist gently fluttered his fan and replied, "Think nothing of it. Pay no heed to me and proceed with your business." Taemin pondered silently. To publicly punish him right before my eyes, the grand strategist of the Wulin Alliance. He was Inti Taemin, the grand strategist of the Wulin Alliance, who was observing this entire spectacle with profound, calculating eyes. Gazing down at the figure kneeling below, Taemin silently assessed the situation. The Iron Sword sect seemed determined to cast the Tae-heal sect out of the 108 peaks at all costs. Tae-san struck his head heavily against the stone floor, fresh blood seeping out in crimson stains. He pleaded desperately, "My foolish son has committed a capital offense. I beg for your mercy. Then, let me hear what exactly this capital offense is that your son has committed." Drops of bright red blood dripped from Tyson's forehead onto the cold earth. Choking back his tears, he answered, he used words that insulted the Iron Sword sect. Cheon-wol burst into a mocking laugh, his eyes glinting with cruelty. "Ah, to me, like father, like son indeed. This brings back memories of your past. 20 years ago, you two." Right at that moment, Jin So-eun rushed in. Witnessing his father's humiliation, he could not suppress his boiling fury and roared, "What on earth do you think you are doing?" Silence fell instantly over the courtyard. So-eun stood frozen in the middle of the audience grounds, his eyes locked upon his father, who knelt prostrate on the ground, before the watching eyes of their superiors. He rushed to his father's side, his voice trembling with bitter anguish. "Please, father, stand up. Why must you kneel like a criminal?" Keeping his head bowed, Tae-san spoke in a low, restraining tone. "Stay back. What father in this world could stand idly by and watch his own child endure suffering alone?" So-eun clenched his fists, his reply fierce and unyielding. And no child in this world could stand by and watch their father look so wretched. Tae-san could only fall silent in aging sorrow. "Step back." He clenched his fists, the veins bulging on his hands, as he stared down at his father. Looking down from his high perch, Ju-tae spoke with a mocking, sneering drawl. "What touching fatherly love. Your father grovels on the ground, begging me to spare your life. It nearly moved me to tears. I shall spare you this once for the sake of your father's sincerity. So kneel beside him this instant." So-eun's eyes turned ice cold. Without a shred of hesitation, he gripped the hilt of his sword, and slowly drew the sharp steel blade from its scabbard, the scraping of metal echoing with murderous intent. The gleaming blade swept through the air, catching the brilliant sunlight. He declared with absolute resolve, "Father, my sword is drawn. From this moment on, Your apologies carry no weight. So please, father, step back. Taesin watched his son's back with mounting anxiety. Soon, what in the world are you planning to do? Soon tilted his head slightly, his voice brimming with unyielding resolve. I only wish to show them that my words are not empty boasts. You foolish child. I will not disappoint you, father. Just watch. Standing opposite him, Mo Hyun curled his finger in a mocking provocation, gesturing for his opponent to step forward. The two opponents faced each other in the center of the arena under the watchful eyes of the gathered disciples from various sects. I eagerly await to see the prowess of a grandmaster from the 108 peaks. Let us see what you are truly made of. Sowoon dropped into a combat stance, his razor-sharp gaze entirely locked onto his opponent. Raised as the heir to the Iron Sword sect, Mo Hyun had grown up pampered with every resource his sect had to offer. And yet, Mo Hyun rested a colossal broadsword upon his shoulder, the blade radiating a chilling aura of death. The weapons of the Iron Sword sect were immensely heavy. They stood at a complete disadvantage against the swordplay of the Tae sect, which championed elegance and swiftness. Sowoon lunged forward like a bolt of lightning, his sword carving fluid arcs of light through the air. The lesser heaven sword art. First, I shall overwhelm him with speed. First form. Mo Hyun's eyes narrowed, a dangerous crimson gleam flashing within them as he tracked the incoming strike. Sowoon's sword clashed violently against his opponent's colossal blade, unleashing a brilliant shower of sparks. Like a scurrying rat, Sowoon spun swiftly, unleashing a flurry of consecutive strikes in search of a gap in his opponent's defense. With a powerful sweep of his broadsword, Mo Hyun shattered Sowoon's onslaught, the sheer, crushing force of the blow sending the youth staggering back. The shockwave from the swing whipped up a violent gale, sending dust and debris flying, forcing the onlookers to shield their faces. Hu-man shook his head in disappointment. I knew the Iron Sword sect was formidable, but to be forced back from the very first clash. Just as the rumors say, the Tae sect is truly devoid of talent. Is this the extent of your strength? Sowoon gritted his teeth, sweat pouring down his temples as the sheer disparity in their physical strength pressed down upon him. Shouldering his broadsword once more, Mo Hyun looked down triumphantly at the fallen Sowoon. As expected of the Tae sect, you are nothing out of the ordinary. Planting his sword into the dirt to prop himself up, he snarled directly to his face, shut your mouth. The battle erupted with violent fury, as sword strikes tore through the air. Sowoon roared with defiant pride. This was only the beginning. Their blades locked in a screech of metal, sending showers of sparks flying. His opponent's face loomed close, wearing a savage, mocking grin, while Sowoon strained with every ounce of his strength to withstand the suffocating pressure. Sweat poured down Sowoon's brow as the terrifying weight of his enemy's true strength sank in. Damn it, he is ridiculously strong. Mo Hyun's frigid gaze reflected off the gleaming steel as he whispered with venomous sarcasm, once upon a time, there was someone just like you, wasn't there? Sowoon's pupils constricted in sheer shock. A fool from that wretched sect, utterly blind to his own limits, insulted the Iron Sword sect just as you have, and challenged my father to a duel. What? Memories of the past flickered like embers, conjuring the image of a proud man kneeling before a grand hall. Naturally, he was defeated. If you beg for forgiveness now, I shall show mercy, he was told. Yet, he spoke aloud, declaring he could never confess to a sin he did not commit, and certainly not before those who had defiled his sect. And so, he paid dearly for his insolence toward the Iron Sword sect. Do you know what that price was? The flood of a branding hot blade. A bare, blood-streaked back crisscrossed with horrific burns, the grim legacy of a barbaric punishment. His back, his chest, and even his abdomen. Those searing scars were branded into him, a cruel mutilation meant to shatter the honor of a true martial artist forever. Mo Hyun wore a triumphal smirk, poised to deliver a devastating psychological blow. And the name of that fool was... The sullen face of Tyson flashed in his memory. The horrific truth, laid bare, left Sowoon utterly paralyzed. It was none other than Tyson of the Tae sect. Whipping his head toward the spectator stands in sheer disbelief, Sowoon saw his father standing there, frozen like stone. What? Tyson's eyes betrayed a profound anguish and dread as the darkest secret of his life was dragged into the light before his own son, and the entire world. Seizing the momentary lapse, Mo Hyun unleashed a thunderous kick straight into Sowoon's chest. How dare you look away in the middle of a duel? The devastating impact hurled Sowoon backward, sending him crashing violently onto the cracked stone ground in a cloud of billowing dust. From the stands, Tyson and Se Ryan cried out in unison, their voices laced with raw panic. Soun. Senior brother Jin. The battle seemed all but decided as Soun struggled to rise. Mo Hyun looked down at his opponent with utter disdain, sneering that any further effort was futile. Yet, a gasp of surprise escaped him when he saw the youth still refuse to stay down. Even if I must swallow the humiliation right before my eyes. Truly, like father, like son. Mo Hyun sneered with venomous malice. And by that, I mean your absolute lack of brains. Swallowing the shame, acting as if nothing happened, and masking it all with a smile. Smug whisper it began to ripple through the surrounding crowd. Honestly, they call this a duel. He is utterly outmatched. As expected, the Taeil sect is pathetic. That shameful history is bound to repeat itself. Is that what everyone thinks? He and Soun let out a soft, wary sigh, bracing himself for the decisive counter-strike. He suddenly launched himself into the air, executing the basic first form of the lesser heavenly sword art. Below, the crowd immediately jeered, mocking it as nothing more than the pathetic swordplay of a trash sack. Moving with breathtaking agility, Jin Soun spun through the air, miraculously evading the massive blade by a mere hair's breadth. What? Jin Soun's cold gaze reflected off his gleaming blade. If that is how it is, he thought, then I shall truly begin. Mo Hyun's blade carved fierce arcs through the air, closing the distance with unbelievable velocity. Mo Hyun roared in fury as the tide of battle shifted too rapidly. What in the world are you doing, you little brat? He screamed. How is this possible? In Jin Soun's mind, the pages of ancient archives illuminated brilliantly, allowing him to see through every single flaw in his opponent's technique to deliver the perfect counter-strike. What underhanded trick did you use? Jin Soun's eyes gleamed with a sharp intensity. He vowed to himself that he must grow stronger still. Pressing forward with a relentless onslaught to grow stronger still, he unleashed the first form of the lesser heavenly sword art once more. This time, however, it carried a vastly different, overwhelming power that completely hemmed his opponent in. Blood began to seep from Mo Hyun's face as his eyes widened in sheer horror at the youth's crushing power. Jin Soun's expression remained chillingly calm, his absolute dominance over the arena unquestionable. Reeling from the massive impact, Mo Hyun coughed up blood as the heavy broadsword in his hand began to tremble violently. Is this truly all the Iron Sword sect is capable of? You miserable whelp. Roaring in a frenzied rage, Mo Hyun hoisted his heavy broadsword high with both hands, screaming to demand how the boy dared use such underhanded tricks against him. Channeling every ounce of his inner energy, he brought his blade crashing down onto the ground, unleashing a terrifying shockwave as he executed the mountain-shattering sword art to crush his opponent beneath his feet. Clouds of dust and debris billowed across the arena from the cataclysmic impact, prompting the spectators to cry out in terror. What on earth is that? Below, the crowd shielded their faces in panic, dodging the shards of stone flying in all directions. Is he trying to murder him? The dust is too thick, I can't see a thing. Shrouded in the thick, swirling dust, Mo Hyun swung his heavy broadsword like a madman. He roared in sheer fury upon realizing his strike had missed its mark. You vile insect. Out of the shroud of dust, a sharp gleam of sword light suddenly shot forth, carrying his broadsword with absolute precision. His eyes widened in sheer disbelief as a colossal pressure recoiled back through Soun's blade. In stark contrast to his opponent's mounting panic, Soun remained cold and expressionless, his focus entirely locked onto every trajectory of his sword. Sparks flew in rapid succession as the deafening clangs of clashing metal reverberated throughout the arena. Xian Wu could not believe his eyes as the tide of the battle turned. No. How can this be? Tamin narrowed his eyes, analyzing the scene. The Tae-sek's swordblade is sharper than I anticipated. Furthermore, the solemn strategist continued his astonished analysis. Above all, there seems to be a vast gulf in real combat experience between them. The disciples of the Iron Sword sect began to panic, arguing loudly to reassure themselves. Young Master Mo Hyun is being overwhelmed. What the hell are you talking about? That bastard must be using some underhanded trick, utilizing the dust to distract young Master Mo Hyun. How could a mediocre sect like the Tae-sek ever hope to defeat our Iron Sword sect? This is absurd. Soun pressed his lips together as thoughts of his family's deep-seated vengeance welled up in his heart. An ill-fated destiny, relentlessly clinging to him from the past. The memory of his father kneeling in humiliation flashed through his mind, fueling his resolve to a boiling point. Even if I win this duel, it is still not enough to sever the cruel chains that have bound us for so long. Mo Hyun roared in a frenzy, channeling all his strength into a downward strike. Your rat-like luck ends here. The blade tore through the air, and a lethal R, but he agilely sidestepped it, evading it by a hair's breadth. Capitalizing on the opening left by his opponent's overcommitted miss, he closed the distance instantly, lunging toward the man's flank. A strange, emerald green true Kai erupted from his bracelet, tightly binding his opponent's blade-wielding arm. Mo Hyeon's eyes bulged in terror, as he felt this bizarre power completely suppressing his own inner energy. He struggled desperately, but could not break free from the constriction. What kind of sorcery is this? There was only one path left. Jin Soum spun and swung his sword with absolute decisiveness, his cold, sharp gaze fixed upon his opponent. Just you wait. After today, I will make the iron sword sect kneel forever at the feet of the Tae sect. The surrounding crowd gaped in astonishment, unable to believe their eyes at how rapidly the tide of battle had turned. Mo Hyeon's face contorted in sheer shock, cold sweat pouring down as he realized he had been completely overwhelmed. In stark contrast to his opponent's chaotic state, the youth of the Tae faction maintained a cold countenance, as serene as the still waters of an autumn lake. The heavy broadsword fell in a free drop, imbeling the ground with immense force, and sending a massive crack spreading across the martial arena. Mo Hyeon staggered backward to regain his balance, while his opponent stood tall and proud, holding his sword with utter arrogance. He gnashed his teeth, humiliation and rage vividly written across every fiercely trembling muscle of his face. Mo Hyeon, the blood wolf of the iron sword, actually dropped my weapon. Damn it. Can it. Damn it. And it, the blood wolf of the iron sword, actually losing to someone like him. He unleashed a frenzied roar, and lunged straight forward, channeling every ounce of his remaining strength into a decisive strike. Yet, Jin Soum merely slipped aside with ease to dodge, making the man's missed lunge appear utterly clumsy. Unable to control his forward momentum, he tumbled to the ground in a pathetic heap. What? He scrambled to his feet, fresh blood trickling from the corner of his mouth, his eyes filled with absolute bewilderment. Up in the spectator stands, Cheon Wol's face darkened upon witnessing this, his murderous gaze staring intently down at the arena. Mo Hyeon struggled to stand, but his body swayed unsteadily. Don't make me laugh. He swung his sword frantically, unleashing a desperate slash in a bid to turn the tide. Soum merely deflected the strike with a light flick of his blade, his demeanor remaining completely calm and effortless. The heavy broadsword stabbed deeply into the ground between them, sending clouds of dust billowing across the dueling arena. Mo Hyeon's pupils contracted with terror as he realized the unbridgeable chasm in strength between them. Mo Hyeon stared at his trembling hand, the aura around him in complete disarray. How strange, he thought. My internal energy is constantly being severed. Because of this, I cannot even execute my techniques properly. He collapsed to his knees on the stage, cold sweat pouring down as he felt his strength slipping away. Even merely holding his sword was an immense struggle. What on earth is this? Jin Soum swung his sword with decisive grace, looking down coldly at his struggling opponent. Your internal cultivation is still far too shallow, he said indifferently. How laughable. Driven back under the pressure of the assault, Mo Hyeon stumbled as Soum's blade stabbed down right between his legs. He gnashed his teeth, his shock knowing no bounds. Mo Hyeon's face contorted with rage, blood trickling from his mouth as he roared inwardly. Someone like me, who has consumed all the precious spiritual elixirs of the Iron Sword sect. He fell backward in utter helplessness, his actually being overwhelmed in internal energy. Soum stood tall above him, raising his sword high, poised to deliver the decisive blow to end the match. Mo Hyeon's eyes widened as a memory flashed through his mind, and a horrific realization dawned upon him. Wait, could it be? Now that I think about it, from the very moment that guy laid his hand on me earlier. Soum's sword swept forward as fast as lightning. He screamed in sheer terror as he saw the sharp blade rushing toward his eyes. Sorcery. You lunatic. Who do you think you are standing before? Backing away, he shouted his accusations aloud to draw the crowd's attention. To shamelessly use dark arts banned by the Martial Alliance right in the middle of a duel. He is a spy of the demonic cult. Arrest this bastard at once. A thunderous shout reverberated across the arena, silencing everyone instantly. Enough. Mo Hyeon looked up at his savior, his eyes filled with hope. Grandfather. Groveling on the ground, he tried to defend himself, his face a mask of panic and misery. He definitely used dark arts, grandfather. They felt it with absolute clarity. Soum stood in silence, tilting his head to look at the defeated foe who was trying to slander him with an expressionless gaze. That bastard must have mastered the heaven-devouring divine art. The crowd broke into a hushed frenzy, their faces reflecting sheer panic and dread. the heaven-devouring art. If it's that, isn't it a forbidden art? It's a secret technique that absorbs the opponent's internal energy. The atmosphere on the stage instantly grew suffocatingly tense, the three men standing in their respective positions to form a stifling, silent standoff. Tamin stroked his beard, deep in thought, his sharp eyes filled with scrutiny. Heresy and forbidden arts. Those were words that must absolutely never be uttered lightly. Those who practiced dark and forbidden arts would be severely punished by the martial alliance. Conversely, if found to be making false accusations, the accuser would face an even more merciless punishment. The defeated warrior could only tremble in sheer terror at the ironclad warning from his opponent. Since those words had just escaped his grandson's mouth, the sect leader of the Iron Sword sect must be in a state of immense turmoil. Tamin thought to himself that he should intervene at the right moment, while finding this whole farce utterly pathetic. From Jin So-eun's perspective from behind, the sect leader of the Iron Sword sect loomed as he stepped toward his grandson, who was kneeling in utter humiliation amidst the ruined stage. He and the others insulted our Tae sect, yet I endured it. I even took the initiative to apologize and back down, but he insisted on a duel, claiming he could not let it pass because I had insulted the Iron Sword sect. His ulterior motive was all too clear. He wanted to prove that the Tae sect is weaker than the Iron Sword sect, and that the Iron Sword sect deserves a place among the 108 peaks instead of us. He wanted to display this for the entire world to see. Even so, I accepted the duel to claim victory, and prove the strength of the Tae sect through genuine martial skill. His muscular arm tightened, reflecting his unyielding resolve. Seeing himself on the verge of defeat, he resorted to vile slander, accusing his opponent of using dark arts. And what did he just claim? The heaven-devouring art. How utterly despicable. He coldly declared before all the gathered martial artists that it seemed the Iron Sword sect was completely unworthy of joining the 108 peaks. A faint smirk played on Tamin's lips. He thought to himself that watching a little longer wouldn't be a bad idea at all. So it turns out all of this stems from the Iron Sword sect's jealousy over not making it into the 108 peaks. To insult another sect just for that. Still, falsely accusing someone of using dark arts is going too far. Well said. If this gets out, his entire sect will be dragged down with him. In the end, he only succeeded in dragging the Iron Sword sect's name through the mud. The defeated man knelt on the ground, his entire body trembling violently in deep humiliation as he endured the crowd's cheers. He frantically slammed his fist onto the ground with a loud thud, screaming at his grandfather that he was Mo Haeon, the proud blood wolf of the Iron Sword. Since childhood, I have never lost to any peer in either internal energy or martial prowess. How could someone like me lose to a mere disciple of the Tae sect? If it was not dark arts, how could I have possibly lost? During the duel, I clearly felt my internal energy being disrupted and drained multiple times. It was to confirm this that I continued the fight. If this unfilial grandson this disciple of the Iron Sword sect, Mo Haeon is lying, I am willing to bear all consequences. Hearing this, the sect leader's expression changed in shock. Glaring with bloodshot eyes, he shrieked frantically that he was willing to accept any punishment for his transgressions if his accusations proved false. Faced with his grandson's fierce conviction, the sect leader of the Iron Sword sect could only fall silent and let out a heavy sigh. We shall stop this duel here. The sect leader stepped decisively into the center of the arena, raising his hand to declare the end of the contest before his opponent. Stop it. By what authority do you halt a duel whose victor has already been decided? Suspicion of dark arts has been raised, so we cannot turn a blind eye. I must examine your meridians. Jin So-eun asked back with disdain if they still intended to frame a small sect like the Tae sect just because they had failed to make the list. This retort incensed the sect leader, the veins on his forehead bulging as he demanded to know if the youth was implying his grandson was a liar. If I and my Tae sect are innocent, how do you intend to bear the consequences? He let out a sinister, confident smile, taking absolute control of the trap the enemy had walked into themselves. Jianwol pointed a trembling finger in rage, and roared, "Shut your mouth. Your desperate stalling only makes you look all the more guilty." Stepping forward with aggressive malice, he threatened, "I will search you this instant, then report to the Murim Alliance. And I will hold you and every last soul of the Tae sect fully accountable." A heart-wrenching cry pierced the suffocating tension. Below the stage, from Se-rayon to the gathered martial artists, everyone wore expressions of sheer shock, holding their breath as they watched every movement atop the arena. Gripping the hilt of his sword tightly, Jin So-eun declared with grim resolve, "This unfilial child, for the honor of the sect which I value above life itself, shall sacrifice his own life here today." Please. Please forgive me. Turning to Tamin, he spoke in a resonant voice. O Samantha's Hall Master, if I am crippled or die right here, please ensure that no one touches my body until the Hall of Discipline of the Murim Alliance arrives. Standing tall in the wind-swept arena, Gin Soon proudly proclaimed his name. Gin Soon of the Taisak. As his hand clenched the hilt, a violent surge of azure true Kai erupted from his blade. For my honor and the honor of my sect, which has been dragged through the mud by the treacherous schemes of the Iron Sword sect, I am prepared to die. His eyes flared with lethal intent as he thrust his sword forward. And I hereby officially challenge the sect leader of the Iron Sword sect to a duel. The audacious challenge left the entire audience gasping in utter disbelief, unable to trust their own ears. You miserable brat, how dare you! Erupting with protective internal energy that shook the very foundation of the arena, he roared in fury. How dare you raise your voice before the master of the Iron Sword sect? The crushing weight of his true Kai was so immense that onlookers stumbled backward, groaning in agony under the unbearable pressure. Instantly, two figures flashed forward, shielding Jin So-eun from the blast. Father. Hall Master. Turning back, the Hall Master scolded him with a fierce glare. But what behind the ears brat like you thinks he can act like a grown man? Fall back at once. There is no father under heaven who would let his child march to death before him. Jian-woo charged forward like a demon, his killing intent soaring to the heavens. Fine. Today, I shall personally snuff out the final breath of the Tae sect. The spectators watched in breathless horror at the precipice of the impending bloodbath. Stop. A commanding voice sliced through the suffocating tension. It was Tamin, his silver hair catching the wind, his eyes closed in deep contemplation. At the sound of that voice, every single person froze in their tracks. Stepping forward with stately grace, Tamin commanded, everyone, sheath your swords. The vast square plunged into a sudden, dead silence, as the trembling crowd whispered in awe, the chief strategist. Tamin turned his piercing, heavy gaze upon Jin So-eun, advising, you should sheath your blade as well. Gripping his sword even tighter, the youth met his gaze, and replied with unwavering resolve, I cannot sheath my sword. His face flushed purple with rage. Jian-woo glared and roared, insolent whelp. How dare you show such disrespect before the chief strategist of the Murim Alliance? Unmoved by the fury of the Iron Sword sect master, Tamin remained calm, narrowing his eyes slightly as he asked, and what is your reason? Pointing his sword directly at Jian-woo, Jin So-eun declared proudly before the gathered martial world, when the Iron Sword sect used a duel as a pretext to humiliate our Tae sect, and threatened me by falsely accusing me of using dark arts. A fire of righteous fury blazed in his eyes as he confronted the most powerful figure present. Where were you then, chief strategist? How can I place my trust in a chief strategist such as you? Tamin took slow steps down the stairs, his white robes billowing in the wind, as he murmured with deep meaning, insolent, yet incredibly brave. My words, spoken as the chief strategist, carry the weight of the martial alliance itself. However, it is true that I delayed my intervention simply because I found this far too entertaining. So, tell me, what is it that you desire? Standing face to face with Jian-woo, he hesitated before speaking. Jin So-eun's gaze turned icy cold, and he voiced his demand with a ringing clarity that sent shivers down everyone's spines. I want the head of the Iron Sword sect's leader. A faint, amused smile played on the corner of Tamin's lips at Jin So-eun's audacity, as he silently observed, a bold decision indeed. To demand the head of the Iron Sword sect's leader was, in other words, a duel to the death. The outcome was all too clear. The boy would lose. Yet, if he died in that duel, he would become a martyr, who sacrificed his life for his sect and family. Meanwhile, the Iron Sword sect would be branded as vile hypocrites who flouted the justice and principles of the martial alliance, bullies who oppressed the weak and drove them to their deaths. This incident would serve as a prolonged political weapon, ultimately paving the way for the Iron Sword sect's downfall. Tamin let out a scheming chuckle, his eyes gleaming with sharp calculation as he saw through this endgame move. Fascinating, truly fascinating. This boy has wagered his very life to prove his innocence. How certain are you, sect leader? What is it? Are you willing to stake your own sect's plec on this? Both, chief strategist. Unearthing and eradicating dark arts is the natural duty of any member of the martial alliance. Why should I stake my sect's plec on such a matter? If you insist on holding me accountable, then as that brat said, I shall take responsibility with my sword. Tamin gently stroked his long beard, his sharp eyes locking onto his opponent before he replied leisurely, you say with your sword. Very well. In that case, how about we use your divine weapon as the wager? Jin So-eun froze, his eyes widening in utter astonishment at the chief strategist's audacious proposal. An ancient mural on the wall served as the backdrop for the majestic ninefold sword, resting grandly upon a wooden rack. The divine weapon of the Iron Sword sect leader. A legendary blade said to have been wielded by the founder of the Iron Sword sect, passed down through generations of sect leaders. The ninefold sword. This was a blatant provocation from the chief strategist. But why was he targeting the Iron Sword sect leader? What? Chief strategist. I did not mean I would wager the ninefold sword. I meant I would engage in a duel. How could I possibly wager the ancestral heirloom of the Iron Sword sect? Ming paced leisurely, his white robes billowing with absolute confidence as he cornered his opponent. Why is a duel even necessary? If what the sect leader says is true, we need only inspect the boy's dantian, and the matter will be settled. Surely, the sect leader does not lack confidence. Even in my eyes, today's situation is utterly preposterous. Could it be that, just as the Tay sect claimed, you are attempting to use the backing of the Martial Alliance? The old sect leader's face darkened under the suffocating pressure of these steel-cold accusations. To commit such a despicable act. Xian Wol stood in silence, enduring the blow as shadows veiled half of his aged face, which was twisted with fury and humiliation. Very well. I shall do as you say. Ming patted the old sect leader's shoulder, then turned to look at the youth with a meaningful smile. Excellent. Are you also satisfied with this condition? Jin So-eun stood tall amidst the howling wind, his cold gaze unwavering before this colossal gamble. The chief strategist stepped closer, reaching out his hand to touch the youth's pulse. Now, relax. I am about to examine your body, so do not resist my true kai. His two fingers gently tapped So-eun's wrist, and a gentle stream of Escher true kai began to weave its way into his meridian. A blinding aura erupted from the point of contact, forcing everyone nearby to squint in astonishment as they watched. The image of Mo Hayan flashed in their minds. He has learned the heaven-devouring art. Since the heaven-devouring art is a technique that absorbs the true kai of others, various types of conflicting kai will coexist within the dantian of the one who has mastered it. If this person's dantian is in such a state, Jin So-eun's hand tightened around his sword hilt, as the azure dragon bracelet hidden beneath his wrist wraps flashed with a mysterious emerald gleam. Min's sharp gaze suddenly constricted in sheer astonishment as he probed Jin So-eun's meridians. This boy. Below, the crowd of disciples broke into a cold sweat, holding their breath, as they watched every movement of the powerful grand strategist. He has never practiced the heaven-devouring art. What? He did not learn the dark arts. Impossible. He must have practiced the heaven-devouring art. Please, you must believe me. Indeed, there is no way the Tae sect could have defeated the Iron Sword sect without resorting to the dark arts. I will not believe it until I have confirmed it with my own eyes. I must examine this myself. What do you think you are doing? I will do it myself. So-eun grit his teeth, enduring the brutal, crushing force unleashed upon him, his face contorting in excruciating pain. Xian-wol, what in the world are you doing? A heart-wrenching scream of agony tore through the air as the violent Truki ravaged his internal organs. Grandfather. He is going to die. Startled, Xian-wol abruptly withdrew his hand, watching the young man collapse at his feet in a pool of crimson blood. So-eun, So-eun. Wake up. This cannot be. Xian-wol. What in the heavens do you think you are doing? Damn it, there is clearly not a single trace of the heaven-devouring art. But how can this be? He propped himself up against the ground, struggling to rise. Xian-wol. Crimson droplets of blood dripped from Jin So-eun's wounds onto the arena floor, a stark testament to the despicable actions of his superior. Atone for your sins. Oh Hyun gnashed his teeth, staring at Jin So-eun, whose bruised and battered face burned with absolute hatred as he roared, for this cowardly deed that you and your descendants have wrought. Below the spectator stands, Morin watched him with mounting dread, her hands clasped tightly to her chest. Jin So-eun's blood-soaked hand trembled as he raised it toward Xian-wol. So-eun's face contorted in agony, blood streaming ceaselessly from the corners of his eyes and mouth, yet his gaze still blazed with ferocious hatred. Pay the price. His frail body collapsed onto the arena floor, his breath shallow and flickering like a candle in the wind. A fitting price. Taesun and Chae Seok rushed onto the stage in a panic, desperately catching So-eun's unconscious body amid the frantic cries of the onlookers. So-eun. So-eun. Senior brother Jin. Grand strategist Ming's face darkened, his teeth grinding in sheer fury. Sect leader. Keep your promise. Radiant morning sunlight washed over a majestic pavilion as the sweet melody of birdsong echoed through the tranquil air, stark contrast to the suffocating tension of the previous day. Within the unfamiliar chamber, a pair of eyes slowly fluttered open. He blinked repeatedly to adjust to the light, straining to push himself up, but his entire body still itched. Beer. So suddenly bolted upright like a coiled spring, his eyes wide with alarm, shouting in raw vigilance as if he were still standing upon the arena of life and death. A hand composedly came to rest upon an ancient tome atop the wooden table, as a deep, leisurely voice echoed from beside the bed. You are awake, then. In that case. Leaning back in his chair, Taemin fixed a piercing gaze directly upon Soun, as though peering into the very depths of his soul. Is the play finally over? Meanwhile, in a dark and damp corner of the dungeon, two scurrying mice fled in panic across the freezing stone floor. From the depths of the gloomy cell, Mo Hyun lunged forward in a frenzy, clutching the iron bars and screaming in sheer helplessness and resentment. That bastard has surely mastered the heaven-devouring technique. Weeping bitterly, his battered face pressed tight against the cold iron bars, as he pleaded, "Please believe me, grandfather. He must have used the heaven-devouring technique." Xianwol stood with his back to the cell, his silhouette dreadfully cold and solitary amidst his grandson's desperate cries. Have you still not come to your senses? He walked away without a single moment of hesitation, leaving the defeated wretch behind to beg in futile despair. Do you have any idea what we have lost, because of you? To think I once considered passing the iron sword sack to a fool like you. Grandfather. Please, let me explain. Foolish child. Do not dare dream of drinking even a single drop of water until you have fully reflected upon your actions. Grandfather. Has the play finally come to an end? Jin Soun started in shock upon hearing the loaded question from the wooden table. What do you mean by that? The play. Just what is he implying? He realized, with a sinking heart, that he could never hope to deceive such a man with a half-hearted performance. His opponent was a genius among geniuses. Do not waste any more time. Taemin, the grand strategist of the Murim Alliance. If the Murim boasted the heroic alliance leader, Nong Soa, then the scholarly world possessed the peerless strategist, Taemin. He had passed away prior to Soun's regression, before the great war between good and evil erupted. Yet, rumors whispered that had he lived, he might have saved the Murim Alliance from the devastating losses inflicted by the demonic cult. Did you know everything from the very beginning? Of course. I know all. He laid bare how Soun had deliberately provoked Qianwol into stepping forward, creating a perfect pincer movement, and used his hand to avoid a direct sparring match. You even won their trust, while clearing your own name. Furthermore, that pathetic mouthful of blood you spat out back then was merely the result of biting your own cheek to deceive them all. The strategist's slender hand set his brush down upon the inkstone with quiet finality. Now, tell me. When did you orchestrate this scheme? Jin Soum's eyes widened in sheer astonishment, utterly paralyzed by the bone-chilling astuteness of the grand strategist. The chamber fell into an oppressive silence, save for the wind, whispering softly through the round window. Cold sweat broke out like rain upon Jin's forehead. Taemin calmly lifted his cup of hot tea, waiting in leisurely composure for his response. Have you forgotten how to speak? Confronted by such absolute, overwhelming pressure, he could do nothing but bow his head in silence. Jin Soun's bare feet padded softly across the wooden floor as he approached Taemin, quietly asking if something was amiss. Is that the ninefold sword I was supposed to receive? Let me have a look at it first. Let's see what we have here. Soun's demeanor instantly shifted to one of playful greed. His eyes sparkled like twin stars, and he practically drooled with sheer excitement at the prospect of the priceless treasure. Taemin stood utterly dumbfounded, staring blankly at the shameless brat's instantaneous turnabout. Are you listening to me? I wonder how much this would fetch if I sold it. Let me see, let me see. You impudent brat. Sell it. The ninefold sword. Taemin muttered. And it is not as if I planned this from the very beginning. It had all begun when the Iron Sword sect invited the Tae sect, with whom they shared no warm relations, to their grand 60th birthday feast. In truth, it was because he remembered everything from before his reincarnation. But he had resolved that if the Iron Sword sect dared to provoke trouble at the banquet, he would utterly shatter their arrogance. Taemin's sharp eyes narrowed, scrutinizing the youth's every micro-expression to gauge the truth of his words. Do you mean to say you anticipated the duel with Mo Hyun? You even foresaw that he would bring up the forbidden arts during the fight. It defies reason. How did you manipulate Mo Hyun into thinking that way? Answering any further is simply not worth my effort. What? Not worth your effort? What do you mean by that? You aided me in acquiring the ninefold sword, grand strategist. But I have already repaid you by answering one of your questions. In the Jianfu, there are men who would willingly wait for days on end, bearing 10,000 taels of gold, just to speak with me. Is that not because they expect to gain something worth far more than 10,000 taels of gold from you? Are you suggesting I have nothing to gain from you? Precisely. If you have no further questions, I shall take my leave. Tamin stared in helpless silence, while Soun tilted his head, flashing a mischievous, narrow-eyed grin as if teasingly testing his patience. Here. Is this sufficient? Now, tell me how you knew Mo Hyun would bring up the forbidden arts. A smug smile tugged at the corner of Soun's lips. His prey had bitten the bait precisely as anticipated. It was nothing extraordinary. Like all brilliant geniuses, they possess vulnerabilities that are remarkably easy to exploit. I merely exploited his hubris and his utter refusal to accept defeat. Yet, even I did not expect him to spout nonsense about the heaven-swallowing art or some such folly. Though, in truth, I actually did employ something very similar to it. Fortunately, the Azure Dragon bracelet must have purified the absorbed energy. Even Damin failed to perceive anything amiss when he inspected my dantian. Jin Soun curiously pried open the small box in his hands to inspect its contents, murmuring, "Well then, let me inspect the goods first." His eyes widened in sheer astonishment at the sight of 3 lustrous spiritual pills glowing softly within. Is this not the Iron Heart Elixir, the sacred medicine of the Iron Sword sect? Did their sect leader truly hand even this over to you? Grinning from ear to ear, he beamed, "My thanks. I never expected you to bestow upon me 3 of these invaluable elixirs." The grand strategist's expression turned sullen. He asked in a low, contemplative tone, "You claim you were certain of victory in your duel with Mo Hyun. If that were the case, why did you not secure a swift and easy triumph?" Jin Soum stared directly at Tamin, his back, his eyes unwavering as he explained, "Had I won by a mere margin, whispers of fluke and luck would have surely followed. I sought to ensure that the Iron Sword sect would never dare look down upon the Tay sect ever again. Even if it were a calculated risk, what if I had not been present?" Tamin countered, his voice cutting like a blade. "What if you had been branded a practitioner of the forbidden arts to your dying breath?" Jin Soun closed his eyes, his face entirely devoid of fear even in the face of death. Had they examined my corpse, the truth would have been laid bare that I had never touched a single forbidden art. In that event, the Tay sect would have cleared its name and preserved its honor. Tamin stood frozen, stunned by the youth's fierce resolve. He murmured in a hushed whisper, "All of that? Just for that?" An eerie silence descended upon the secret chamber. The grand strategist turned to face him, his gaze heavy with gravity. "You risked your very life. For nothing more than that." Soun's hands clenched into tight fists, the veins on his knuckles bulging with the weight of a long-suppressed fury. Jin Soun's eyes flashed with a razor-sharp light, harboring an unshakable, iron-willed resolve. Standing face to face, a stifling tension enveloped the chamber as neither man showed any intention of yielding even a single step. "Was that mere eyes all you had to say?" he asked in a low, raspy voice. Glancing down at the calligraphy on the desk bearing the name of the huge clan, he continued, "The huge clan think of the tradition and honor carried by that very name." Taking a step forward, he confronted the grand military advisor with an overwhelming aura and demanded, "Do you truly believe the Tay sect is a sect that lacks such things?" Suming was momentarily taken aback, his eyes widening in sheer astonishment. Suddenly, the grand military advisor burst into a hearty laugh, leaving Jin Soun frozen in bewilderment. "Portling," he said, "intriguing, how truly intriguing. I knew aligning with you would prove far more entertaining." Breaking into a cold sweat, he looked at the old man before him in utter helplessness, thinking to himself, "Intriguing. What on earth is this old man blabbering about? He is truly an eccentric." Suming tossed a small object toward him, and said cheerfully, "I shall grant you another gift for keeping me amused. Consider it a buy one get one free deal." Jin Soun caught the object in utter daze. Looking down closely at the item resting in his palm, he muttered softly, "Is this a token?" The moment he recognized the insignia engraved upon the token, his pupils dilated in sheer shock. Rather than undertaking the regular entrance examination of the Murim Academy notorious as the hellish trial, this item acted as a privilege akin to those of the 108 peaks, allowing a single disciple unconditional admission to the Murim Academy. An admission token. Jin Soun clenched the precious token tightly in his hand, realizing This means we can send yet another disciple of the Tay sect to the Murim Academy. Looking up at his senior with deep gratitude, he asked if the elder truly wished to bestow this upon him. Su Ming smiled and replied, "Once you graduate from the Murim Academy, come to the Bureau of Myriad Information, where you were." Jian Soonim's face instantly went blank, his eyes widening in bewilderment at the sudden proposal. In his mind, a grim vision immediately flashed of an overworked life, endless night shifts, and the sheer impossibility of ever getting married. The Bureau of Myriad Information. Su Ming casually mentioned he would keep a position reserved for him. Drenched in cold sweat, Gin and Soon stammered, asking if he had misheard. The elder explained it was a place where the geniuses among geniuses gathered to work, so he would surely grow to love it. Gin Soon watched the elder's back as he climbed out of the window, utterly speechless, wondering why on earth he insisted on climbing out of the window when the door was right next to him. "So, make haste, and come assist me." The Grand Military Advisor let out a hearty laugh, and vanished past the windowsill. While his laughter still echoed outside, Jin Soon shouted from within the room in sheer discontent, protesting that he wanted no part of it. "I told you I don't want to," he bellowed. Outside, Su Ming chuckled heartily, thinking to himself that the Bureau of Myriad Information was about to become incredibly lively. On the following day at the Iron Sword sect, a serene and solemn atmosphere blanketed the grounds under the morning sun. Beneath the canopy of brilliant wisteria blossoms, Moran stood in silence, watching other disciples hurrying in the distance with a face clouded by worry. She lowered her head in silence, her melancholic gaze suggesting she was bearing an indescribable sorrow following the recent upheavals within the sect. Her mind conjured the chaotic scene of the previous day, when harsh accusations rang out, demanding body circus and holding the entire Tay sect accountable. The image of a blood-drenched Jin Soon, his cold eyes demanding that the opposition pay a fitting price, haunted her mind. She recalled when she had raised her voice to declare that the Iron Sword sect would never be like common street thugs, desperately defending the sect's honor. Returning to reality, she let out a helpless sigh, murmuring to herself that she had only wished to do what was right, yet everything had gone too far. A voice suddenly whispered close to her ear, asking what she was doing out here all alone, causing her to jump and shriek in fright. Regaining her composure, she was struck with astonishment to see Jin Soon standing there, a travel pack slung over his shoulder. She stammered his name in utter surprise. Flustered, she clasped her hands tightly together, awkwardly trying to explain her strange behavior from moments before. Morin bowed her head, her hands clenched tightly in a mixture of remorse and anxiety. "You were far too reckless, brother," she whispered softly. Beneath the canopy of gently drifting purple wisteria blossoms, Jin Soon asked back with utter nonchalance, "Reckless? What do you mean by that?" Morin's gaze wavered slightly. "In that duel, why did you have to go to such lengths?" As wisteria petals drifted through the air, beside them, Yu Zhan was busy tinkering with medicine. The scene shifted back to the tense conversation between Jin Soon and Tamin in the secret chamber, where the latter questioned, "Did you truly wager your very life for such a matter?" "Moran, do you mean that the Tae sect should have just endured such miserable humiliation? Is that what you are trying to say?" Confused and flustered beneath the ancient tree, Moran hurriedly waved her hands in denial. "No, that is not what I meant. What I mean is..." A shadow of sorrow crossed Morin's face as she lowered her head to conceal her own shame and helplessness. Standing beneath the romantic yet melancholy rain of wisteria blossoms, the young girl softly offered her most sincere apology from the bottom of her heart. Moran clenched her fists, thinking to herself that he would surely never accept this apology if she were in his shoes. She wouldn't forgive either. Yet, Jian Soon gently told her to lift her head, for he already understood. Moran looked up blankly, her eyes wide with astonishment at the unexpected tolerance of the young man standing before her. "Though this is not an apology from the direct party involved, I shall accept it. I suppose hoping for an apology from the sect leader would be far too greedy." She hurriedly followed his retreating figure, stammering a promise that she would speak with her grandfather again to settle everything properly. To continue this chain of misfortune, right? Morin's eyes trembled slightly, startled by his words. In the distance, Chae Seok and his fellow disciples turned back to wait. Walking toward them, he spoke, "If you truly feel remorse, please take the responsibility to change the Iron Sword sect so that it is no longer what it is today." As Jin Soon's footsteps trod lightly upon the green grass blanketed with fallen petals, he continued, "Though the Tae sect and the Iron Sword sect share many differences, are we not, in the end, all roots of the same tree called the Murin Alliance?" She let out a soft, gentle sigh. Under the ancient wisteria tree shaded by purple blossoms, the two stood facing each other in the quiet space, the wind gently swaying the hems of their robes. My brother and my grandfather. It is because they could not bring themselves to utter a single apology that things have turned out this way. Unable to contain her emotions, the young girl rubbed her eyes and sobbed, her reddened nose making her look utterly pitiful. Flustered, Jin Soon hurriedly waved his hands to comfort her, advising that tears did not suit a strong warrior like her at all. Solemnly, Moran presented an elegant black wooden box, hoping he would accept her sincerity. His eyes widened in surprise, wondering if today was his birthday, given how he kept receiving precious gifts. Of course, I do not believe this is enough to gain forgiveness for what the Iron Sword sect has done. However, as the young master said, I hope that the Tei sect and the Iron Sword sect will have a good relationship in the future. I bestow this upon you with that very hope. With a soft click, the lid of the box opened. As Jin Soon pried it ajar, he was instantly stunned by the brilliant radiance emanating from within. It was none other than the Iron Guard pill, an extremely rare spiritual medicine reserved solely for those of the direct lineage of the Iron Sword sect, possessing a value that far surpassed the ordinary Iron Heart pill. Then, I hope that the next time we meet, it will be with smiles upon our faces. 2. Hope it shall be so. A few days later, at the main gates of the Tei sect, the familiar, peaceful air returned after days of tumultuous upheaval. Jin Soon's eyes widened as he witnessed the scene before him. The sect leader and the young disciples cheered in excitement, rushing forward in unison to welcome Jin Soon back like a returning hero. The young ones swarmed him, firing off relentless questions about the shocking rumors, even clamoring to see the divine weapon, the ninefold sword, leaving him with nothing but a wry smile to fend off their eagerness. Amidst the boisterous laughter and chatter, a pair of steady feet stepped forward and halted right in front of Jin Soon, causing him to look up in slight surprise. It was Yoon Ho, standing there scratching his head, his face a mark of hesitation and embarrassment. Jin Soon teased his large-statured junior, asking if he wanted a piggyback ride, but Yoon Ho kept his head lowered, solemnly confessing that he had once deeply regretted joining the Tei sect. When everyone asked why I joined the Tei sect, and told me I would never achieve greatness with such a weak lesser heavenly sword art, I had no words to refute them. Recalling the grueling days of training, Yoon-ho realized everything had changed. Deeply moved, he said that thanks to his senior brother, he now felt immensely proud to be a disciple of the Tei sect. The youth's hands tightened around the hilt of his sword like a solemn vow. He declared that he would train relentlessly in the lesser heavenly sword art so as not to disappoint those who believed in him. Yoon-ho's face flushed red, yet his eyes shone with fierce determination as he looked straight ahead. He promised to become an even greater disciple of the Tei sect, just like senior brother Jin. Behind them, Ball leader Chae Seo, Lady Sir Ryan, and the elders watched in silence, their warm smiles brimming with pride at the growth of the younger generation. A firm hand patted Yoon-ho gently on the chest. He flashed a bright smile, gave his junior brother's chest a hearty slap, and cheerfully said he looked forward to seeing his progress in the days to come. The sect leader of the Tei sect, Monkey, who was also Sir Ryan's father, stepped forward with a beaming grin. He cried out in sheer excitement, declaring that upon hearing the news of the Iron Sword sect, he had been so overjoyed that he couldn't sleep a wink all night. Everyone has labored hard, sect leader and hall leaders. Father beside the junior disciples who were crowding around Soon shut your mouth. And you too, just like senior brother Jin. Monkey looked up at the ancient signboard of the Tei sect, his voice dropping into a solemn, reflective tone. For 150 years, since the rise of the Iron Sword sect, their sect had suffered constant humiliation, forced to swallow their bitter resentment due to their own lack of strength and his own incompetence. But Soon had resolved that deep-seated grudge. A mere youth had achieved an extraordinary feat that even the adults of the sect could not bear. The sect leader's heartfelt words left Soon's father and Sir Ryan, standing nearby, deeply moved, feeling both profound gratitude and a twinge of shame. Monkey burst into a hearty laugh to dispel the heavy air, wiping away a tear of emotion. He excitedly proposed that since the boy had achieved such a monumental feat, the entire sect should throw a grand feast to celebrate. Absolutely not. Are you not worried that a single feast will leave the children's rations incredibly meager for the next 6 months? We are lacking funds, they say. But this is no ordinary occasion, is Sid. So what? The young hero has defended the honor of the Tei sect. Can honor put food on our plates? I might as well smash my head against the ground at this rate. Refusing to back down before the pragmatism of the outer hall leader, Monkey decisively pulled a large pouch of coins from his robes. He declared that if Tae-san insisted on being so stingy, he would fund it from his own pocket. If that is the case, then we shall join as well. It is but a small gesture, but since the sect leader has taken the lead. Mun-ki offered a strained laugh as he accepted their contributions, but inwardly he was weeping bitter tears for showing off too much, all while a mysterious figure flitted past in the background. Jin Soon turned and asked if they were indeed having a feast. As this question reached Tae-san's ears, he froze, his expression twisting dramatically. Tae-san turned around with a terrifying visage, gnashing his teeth, as he denied any mention of a feast, pretending that his hearing had gone bad lately, and he hadn't heard a single thing. Tae-san clutched the pile of coin pouches tightly and bolted, shouting with glee as he ran about how the entire sect would now eat meat 3 meals a day, leaving Soum staring after him in speechless disbelief. But what a relief. A soft smile played on his handsome face, his gaze softening as he looked upon his father. Finally, the man had returned to normal. The vast sky was filled with drifting, pure white clouds, bringing a serene peace to the entire sect after the recent storms they had weathered. Of the 3 iron heart pills we received from the chief strategist, 2 of them were given to Se Ryan and me, 1 each. It was decided that the remaining pill would be awarded to the disciple who shows the most exceptional progress in the future. The wooden abacus lay silently on the desk, accompanied by disgruntled muttering. And Shi Liam's father, Eon Seok. Madness, absolute madness. Our sect leader has lost his mind. Taeson clutched his head in frustration over a pile of ledgers, while the male lead stood nearby, nonchalantly chewing on a leaf. 3 ins just to trade for a single iron heart pill. Heavens, what a waste. He doesn't think of the person managing the finances at all. If you give 1 iron heart pill to our Chi Leon, I will hand over 3 ins to you. I have heard of what transpired at the Iron Sword sect. Our Taeyul sect has constantly faced dire straits. Yet Chi Leon, the first disciple, did nothing but drink and watch from the sidelines. The sect leader wore a stern expression, his sharp gaze filled with warning. The honor of our sect was defended with our very lives. Are you planning to sell our sect's honor? So Chuplai. But thanks to that, the junior disciples of Pusum Hall are working much harder now. You prat. With 3 ins and Hefi, we could make enough money to buy 5 iron heart pills every year. A mischievous look crossed Soun's face, a thoughtful, knowing smile playing on his lips. He thought to himself that his father was merely overreacting, while in truth, he was secretly rejoicing that the sect leader had acted so decisively. He turned and walked away decisively, leaving his father sitting helplessly at his desk. I'm heading out. Where on earth are you going now? I'm sick and tired of your constant nagging about money, father, so I'm going to make some. The father and son bickered back and forth through the closed wooden door, creating a highly comical scene. You brat. How do you plan on making money? Aren't you underestimating your son's abilities a bit too much? Anyway, I'm off, see you later. He paused on the porch, tilting his head slightly as he answered the persistent questioning from inside. I am asking where you are going, you little rascal. Where else could I possibly go? To where the money is, of course.